Mr. Dean McAloon. Welcome to the studio.
How are we doing?
I'm doing very well, thank you. How are you?
I'm doing great. Great to be here.
Great to have you. I'm ticking off my one by one the lads coming up from the triage mecca.
Yes.
Have had Buna Hangasa and now we've got Dean McAloon on.
Yeah.
I won't get you to go through a full background. I'll explain to people why I asked you. I've been following you for a while, and I was telling you earlier on, really enjoying your content. And your background is performance nutrition. Before I give a bit more context, would you mind explaining to me what is a performance nutritionist compared to a normal nutritionist?
Sure. So the performance nutritionist moniker is something that I've adopted recently enough. So I did a postgraduate diploma in performance nutrition. And I suppose the primary difference is you're working with athletes in terms of getting them to the best performance that they can express in their sport. However, it can also be categorized as performance for the everyday person, like, someone like yourself, very busy, wants to perform the best in his everyday life, feel great, do the best work possible. It can also be worked into that as well.
Excuse me, I am an athlete.
You are an athlete. You're a content creation athlete. We'll call it that. But yeah, performance nutrition is mostly weighted towards athletes, but it sort of can go into circles of military performance and, just cognitive performance and stuff like that. It's just sort of like using nutrition to fuel the body in a way that allows it to perform the absolute best in whatever sort of endeavor you're trying to achieve, basically.
Which is probably one of the most effective tools you can have to improve your performance in nutrition. And obviously you work as part of the triage team with Brian and the rest of the team over there. And the reason I've asked you to join me today, just to give context for people who might be listening and wondering, what are these guys going to talk about today, is your content specifically has recently particularly focused on helping people to maybe sift through a lot of the information that we've access to. You said something very insightful earlier on, is that we have access to everything at the moment. Mm-hmm. As a person with a phone or any sort of smart device, we can literally figure out how to do anything online. However, that also comes with the disadvantage of there's a lot of conflicting information, a lot of miss and dis and all these lovely words we have information online. So for the average person who may not have a background in, there's no average person, but somebody doesn't have a background in nutrition or health or wellness, this can be a little bit overwhelming, it can be confusing, and it can also lead to a lot of tribalism and a lot of arguments. But the bottom line is people's health suffers if they don't have the right information that applies to them. Yeah. So what I'd like us to have a conversation around today is how do we, as people without backgrounds in this, sift through this information? How do we decide what's valuable for us, what's applicable for us? And we're also going to have a bit of fun debunking some of your favorite and my favorite common kind of maybe misconceptions and stuff out there around the nutrition world. So my first question for you is, how come and why, in your opinion, is there so much bad information out there around the topic of nutrition particularly? Because I feel it's one of the most maybe controversial ones. Sure. People get so emotionally attached to this is right or this is right. What's your experience of that kind of landscape?
Yeah, so nutrition science as a field is a bit of a mess. It doesn't really know what it is in a sense. Part of the problem is that everyone, like in adjacent fields, neuroscientists, doctors, journalists, geneticists, all of these different types of people that have expertise in similar fields but that are still different, they'll try their hand at nutrition. So if you look at, there's a study that I read recently that broke down the proportion of occupations of the best-selling nutrition books, and it's a staggeringly small percentage of actual nutritionists and dietitians that make books about nutrition. It's primarily doctors and journalists and these different types of people that, to the layman, someone with a medical degree, it's like, oh, he's a doctor, he knows about health. But when you actually, and you can ask my colleague Gary about this, like, even though he's very proficient when it comes to nutrition science himself, he's a doctor, but like the vast majority of doctors are not well versed in the application of nutrition science. Like, their actual role is to just give their patients the public health guidelines. It's the role of nutritionists and dietitians that have a deep knowledge of nutrition to actually be able to sit down with someone and give them evidence-based recommendations for whatever particular aspect of their health or goals that they're trying to achieve. So this is a problem because there's no regulation really for this, and people obviously will look to the authority of a doctor or somebody that, let's say, a journalist that's very good at wording things in a sensationalized way, and they're talking about nutrition, but it's not reliable information because they don't have the depth, they don't have that deep knowledge, and they don't have the ability to appraise nutrition research and be actually able to give good information. So another example of this is like Paul Saladino. He's an MD. He's a psychiatrist specifically. So, he's, with regards to mental health side of things, but he's all about, this carnivore diet, carnivore MD, right? So he's using his authority as a doctor. And then obviously he's been on all the different podcasts, Rogan, etc. And people will then look to him and say, okay, this guy is a doctor. He knows what he's talking about. And they'll follow his diet, which, as we were talking about off air, leads to this sort of chain of command of essentially bad things can happen to certain people whenever they follow the things that he purports for extended periods of time.
Okay. The word you used there, which was a lot of our conversation today, is going to center around authority, I think is really, really important. I don't know, was shocked the right word, but I was very interested when I first found out, because a good few of my friends were doctors and I worked with some doctors in the clinic I worked in for years. When I found out how little of their actual qualification focused on things like lifestyle, nutrition specifically, it's a very, very small part of what they study. And this isn't to undermine the efficacy or the qualification of a doctor. It's not their job. And I think and I feel like a lot of people view this hierarchy system of the doctor at the top, and anybody else who does nutrition or dietetics or something like that must just be a watered down version of the doctor. But it's because of this authority, this appeal to authority. This doctor must know everything about everything to do with the human body.
Yeah.
And the reality is they, especially if it's a GP, they have a general understanding of most things, enough to, as you said, provide health guidelines or filter you down the network to a specialist. So this idea of authority for me became really, really interesting when I started to understand that a little bit more. It's not just about this person has this qualification, therefore I bow to everything they say. But nowadays, as we spoke about earlier, authority has a different kind of meaning as well, because you've got this leverage that comes with notoriety or social media following, or potentially I wrote a book on nutrition, which must make me an expert.
Yeah.
But I could write a book on nutrition
and
get it published.
And it'll probably be pretty good, Dan, as well, I'd say.
It'll be very, very bro science. A lot of Joe Rogan quotes in that book on nutrition. But if I have that book, it immediately gives me a level of authority in today's world. And the compounding factor for me with this whole thing is, in general, if you have a specialist in the field like a doctor, they don't have time to build up that social presence. They don't have time to be posting on Instagram, so they don't have the same level of respect, I suppose, among the younger generations today when it comes to nutrition. So
for sure.
You in particular are someone though who has started to bridge that gap a little bit between, you obviously have a background and expertise, I would say, in the field of performance nutrition, and now you're starting to utilize the platforms that we have. How have you found that journey? How's that experience been for you to delve into that world?
I absolutely love making content. I think it's great. Like, I definitely feel like, when you get a sense of like, I'm supposed to be doing this. This is like,
you're in my feeling of that right now. Podcast,
like I'm supposed to be doing this. So I get that feeling when I'm coaching people. So the way I coach people is through Zoom consultation. So this sort of sense of flow that we can achieve when we're doing something we really feel like we're supposed to be doing it. I get that when I'm doing consultations with people and we're working on different difficult problems and stuff like that. But even just kind of working through challenges and seeing people grow and stuff like that. But I also get that feeling whenever I'm really in the content creation process and sort of creating something that I feel is right. This is actually going to be useful to people, and hopefully, by somebody consuming this piece of content, whether it's a podcast or a YouTube video or a piece of vertical short form content, reels, etc., that I'm producing, that I can take someone one step closer to leading a better quality of life, in a sense, So absolutely love it. I think it's one of those things where it's like I have so much room to grow. I feel like I'm only getting started with it as well. And obviously, like, as we talked about off air, there's lots of guys that are really blowing up on social media. I'm not necessarily, focused on I need to have a huge following or anything like that, but I do recognize that there is amazing scope these days for massive growth. And in the same way that, like, as I say, like the likes of, say, Paul Saladino or some of these people that have huge platforms, if I can even get a fraction of what they have and be able to give out good information that's actually helpful to people and that can improve their life, then that's a major win.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it comes down to intent, really, doesn't it, when you're creating this content? Do I want to blow up and just have audience capture and make loads of money off this? Or am I actually trying to have an impact here?
Yeah.
And it seems to be there's a nice balance to be found if you want to have an impact
Sure.
and you understand the game. That's a nice balance there because you're reaching a lot of people, but you're helping a lot of people too.
For sure.
Okay, so we're going to park the toolkit bit till the very end. We're going to kind of give people some information on how they can filter this the kind of the disinformation and understand that authority piece. But I have a list of topics here that I've curated from going through your content. You are a fan of the debunking style of content, and I think obviously it's not just some people do this for again the clout or just to cause controversy. The feeling I've always gotten from your content is that's not the case. You're actually trying to be helpful here. You're actually trying to explain to people why certain information might not necessarily be correct. But it hurts sometimes. It hurts me on a deep emotional level.
I apologize.
When I love my bro science and I love my supplements and I'm like, oh, but Dean says it's not good. What the fuck am I supposed to do now? Or when I get the inevitable message from Brian Hengisa saying, actually, and I'm like, that post I just put up is going to rip the
glasses. Well, actually.
And he's always right as well. So I have a list of stuff here that I would say some of the more common topics that come up when it comes to nutrition, and particularly around things like diets, supplements, things like that, and the stuff that we all love because we all want a silver bullet that's going to fix our issues tomorrow. And we might just kind of go through these and get your feelings on some of them and debunk them and make a lot of people cry who are listening right now. And we'll have a conversation around each one.
Yeah, lovely.
Is there a favourite one that you have that you'd like to start on?
Nothing in particular. You pick a random one.
I'll pick a random one off the list here, and I'm going to start with a big one.
Okay.
The Diary of a CEO.
Okay.
So my feelings, I'll start. I'll make this an easy intro for you. The Diary of a CEO, if people don't know, is a podcast hosted by Stephen Bartlett, who has done very well for himself as a young business entrepreneur, has kind of grown quite rapidly through his 20s. There's lots of companies, lots of money, and he decided to get into the podcast world. I believe that his motivations are good. He has recently, particularly over the last 6 months, he gets very, very big guests on, but recently he seems to be really leaning into the whole nutrition, health side of things and bringing people on who are giving health advice. But what I started to notice as a trend where one, they always had an outrageous claim, and two, they always had a book or a course to sell off the back of an outrageous claim. That's a red flag for me straight away. I'm not saying that, like, because you have something to sell, I have something to sell. I'm not saying it's the worst thing in the world. However, outrageous claim plus Stephen Bartlett plus something to sell is now a big trigger for me. So, don't know the guy, nothing against him personally, but a lot of people I know put a lot of weight on what comes out of that show, and his production is excellent, and his clips are huge, and his guests are massive. So, do you want to give me your, first of all, just your overall opinion on the podcast and that type of information, that type of platform, and then we might dig a little bit deeper into the information.
Yeah. So it is problematic, as you described there. He has huge reach, and this is a problem with Joe Rogan as well. You know, the problem is not just Steve, right? It's Joe Rogan as well. I love Joe. Like everything that Joe does, like the comedy, the UFC, the podcast.
I'm all in.
It's fantastic. I love it. But at the end of the day, like, you know, he's had a lot of bullshit over the years in terms of guests, like even RFK. We'll not get into that because that's not my wheelhouse. When you get Gary on, potentially, you can talk to him about that. But coming back to the Diary of a CEO, like, I think it is problematic because huge reach. Obviously, he has a lot of financial resources and power to like plug into this, and obviously that produces more growth and stuff like that. But like, I think the problem lies in him getting these guests on, as we say, that, as you described, they have these philosophies and a belief system around nutrition that is contrary to the current breadth and depth of evidence in the nutrition field, especially things like nutrition epidemiology. You know, we can pull a lot from that. But these guys and girls come on and they'll have some sort of quirky thing, whether it's like, you know, blood glucose monitoring, if it's like the glucose goddess, or if it's you had like an alternative medicine health practitioner on, she was talking about fasting and all of this kind of stuff. Yeah, and then the guy's name is actually, I've missed his name now. What's his name is Tim something. I should know his name.
James might be able to help us out here. He might be able to jump in at some point. But.
Yeah. What is it?
Your man Tim, the biohacker?
Yes. What is his name? That's
Gray,
wild. What was it, James?
It might be Tim Gray.
No. Anyway,
we'll find it.
We'll find it. But one of his recent guests that was talking about, you know, that don't worry about calories for weight loss and stuff like that. I'm sure that his name will come back to me at some stage. But essentially, it's just these claims that are contrary to what has been established in the nutrition literature. And then obviously Stephen has this huge platform, and he's able to spread this message like a virus in a sense, you know.
This podcast just got flagged on Spotify.
But yeah, so it's kind of like it's this mad spreading of misinformation. And again, this, as I was saying earlier, as it relates to like, say, people jumping on carnivore diets and stuff like that, it is essentially ingraining beliefs that are unhelpful or potentially dysfunctional in the wider population. So calories don't matter. I need to freak out every time I eat fruit because blood glucose spikes. Fasting is going to increase my testosterone, so I need to just not eat, which is like, when you think about it logically, it's like...
Was it 1,700% or 17,000%?
1,300% or something like that. Yeah. Like it's, you know, it's which is an outrageous claim. Like it's quite easy to sort of like, when you actually understand even just basic testosterone levels and even what happens whenever you use like pharmacological interventions with testosterone, it's like, that is an outrageous claim to make that fasting would increase by that much. But again, it's ingraining these beliefs in people that are unhelpful, and then they'll carry those beliefs forward, you know. So, and this, you can pull this back even to whenever I'm dealing with a client that has, say, disordered eating patterns. They have been conditioned over many, many years through things like, you know, maybe their mother's experiences with like slimming clubs, magazines, celebrities promoting bullshit diets and supplements, and the social media machine with like the Diary of a CEO and the sort of the quote unquote nutrition experts that he gets on, feeds into this unhelpful cycle of beliefs around nutrition that don't help people. Like at best, they don't help people. At worst, they can have pretty substantial negative health consequences. Again, I keep coming back to the carnivore diet because I think it is such a good example of, you know, adopting the carnivore diet and then along the chain of command can end in someone having a cardiovascular event whenever they're 40 or 50. So again, this is kind of where the problem lies. It seems innocuous. It seems like it's, you know, not a major issue for say, for example, Stephen to get some of these guys on that are talking about whatever sort of bullshit claim that they're making. But when you actually bring it down to the individual that's consuming the piece of information and then how they carry that piece of information forward, it's real problematic. And it kind of comes back to what you were saying earlier about this huge amount of information that we have access to. There's a quote: "We are drowning in information but starved for knowledge and wisdom."
Yeah. Two things I wanted to go, and I want to make sure I don't forget either one of these things. So we're going to go to the carnivore diet next. That's going to be our next little stop on the train.
Yeah.
But before we do, why do you think that these people can gather so much momentum if these claims are so outrageous? I have my own opinions, but I'd be interested in hearing on why do they gather such momentum and gain such traction and ideology and like emotional fervor behind their claims if they are so outlandish compared to what we kind of accept as this is the generally accepted, I know there's variances, but the general accepted body of knowledge.
Yeah.
Why do you think they're able to do that?
Yeah. Well, first of all, it's you know, there is something, you know, sexy and romantic and interesting about like, right, here's what you've been told. I've got this thing that you've never heard before, and it's the fucking bee's knees. Like, this is going to change your life, you know.
Is that one of the definitions of a charlatan as well, if they have something that's never been heard before, but only I have the information?
Exactly. It's kind of like, because I don't know if you know much about like the whole, like if you've had much experience with like the fake gurus like Dan Locke and, you know, all of these guys that are essentially major cowboys that ruin lives. But it's all, you know, it's essentially, it's similar to that sort of section of the internet of people, money-making schemes where it's like, oh, I have this like amazing piece of information that only I have, you know. Now, again, those kind of like, those money-making schemes, it's a case of like, I'm locking it behind this €2,000 course or whatever it is, which is problematic. But in the case of these guys, it's like, right, sign up to my, buy my book, or some of them have courses. A lot of them have supplements to sell, and which is problematic because you could have somebody that is maybe under a bit of pressure financially, but they're striving to improve their health, and then they believe that the answer to their health is this €150 a month supplement bill, which is another problem. Which is actually separate to the diet considerations. It's like, you know, you have somebody that come along with this huge this line of supplements that people feel like they need to buy, and then that puts them under financial stress. But yeah, sorry, what was the original question? Went off topic there.
Why do you think that you haven't really answered the question? Why do you think that these people can garner such support and gain such momentum if their claims are so outlandish?
Yeah, so another aspect of this as well is not only look what I have is special and it's a magic bullet, and that's really attractive to people and people really gravitate towards that. But it's also like, again, people like that are being taken advantage of as well to some degree. People that maybe don't have the scientific literacy to sort of critique and sort of have the ability to be skeptical about some of these claims, which is very, very difficult for the layman to do. So it's packaged very beautifully and very nicely, so it's very attractive, and that's difficult to overcome as well. Another aspect of this as well is some people will be more susceptible to against the grain thinking. So there is something that I've recently read about, and it's this whole thing of having a cluster of beliefs. So essentially what you will notice is, and this is again depending on someone's political leanings, but it's also like the what sort of background they come from, from an educational but also a familial background as well. Some people will be more likely to believe certain things in a cluster, right? So what you'll find is people that watch Joe Rogan will be more likely to be anti-vaxxing. They will be more likely to adopt the carnivore diet. They'll be more likely to essentially believe things on the more conservative side of the spectrum. Whereas, typically speaking, you'll have more left-leaning people that will be more, delved into the science, shall we say, and be more kind of, they'll trust the sort of the public health institutions and stuff like that in terms of the things that they're reporting. And I'm not saying that the left is better than the right. I'm just saying that typically speaking, when it comes to, say, someone being more susceptible to believing something on the diary of a CEO, part of that can just be down to their general, how they operate, and being more likely to adopt something that's against the grain. In this specific topic of conversation, it's nutrition, so that's a problem as well. It's like packaged very nicely, seems pretty cool, sensational, and then it's like, I'm the type of person that is more likely to adopt something that is against the grain or fancy or against the establishment or whatever it is.
Yeah, I'm glad you went here, because I have another little point here. To develop that point a little bit further, let me just get my nice tinfoil hat, my well-used tinfoil hat out and put it on here. There's two sides to this story, which you've alluded to there, as well as the charlatans and the people who are preying on the vulnerable or the easily manipulated, or people who, because again, working in the medical industry, it's very clear, having been sick many times myself,
yes,
you will do anything to get better. So you're in an emotionally vulnerable state, and you can easily be led. It doesn't mean you're stupid, it just means you're vulnerable and emotionally vulnerable. And I've been there, we've all been there before. But there is also, when we reference the body of data and the science, a lot of the time, there's financial interest there, there's financial incentive there. And if you had this conversation with me 4 or 5 years ago, I would have been triggered by how you're having. I was like, is he starting to say that Joe was wrong? And because I had a cluster of beliefs, and I was. Now I'm very aware of them. I'm not saying I don't anymore, but I'm more aware of my own beliefs now and how I should be a little bit more critical in my own head of the things I consume. And even people who come on this podcast, I'm always very grateful for everyone's time.
Yeah.
But I always sit back afterwards and I'm like, okay, I don't have to just believe everything that person says just because they were nice enough to come on my show.
Sure.
So trying to remove my emotion from it. But on the other side as well, it's the same kind of a game. There's preying on people who are vulnerable, preying on people who are financially struggling, preying on people who are at the mercy of the authority because I don't know where else to go for my health advice. But it becomes emotional and tribal. And I feel like that's maybe for me where the problem is. It's either you don't trust the government and you're a conspiracy theorist, you're an absolute lunatic and everything Joe Rogan says is wrong, or you're on the other side. It's like everything Joe Rogan says is right and everything the government says is wrong. And what I've learned over years of just being a human being is usually the answer somewhere in the middle.
Absolutely.
So being able to remove my emotions has pulled me back from, I was never extreme in my views, but has pulled me back to just being a little bit more aware.
Yeah.
But it's also made me aware of how vulnerable I am to those kind of suggestions. Like when a new supplement comes out and it's just marketed well, or on it comes out with something, I'm like, I just want it.
Absolutely.
Or a podcaster I like advertises something, and because they've almost pre-qualified for me because I agree with one thing they've said.
Yeah.
Now I agree with everything they said.
And
oftentimes, if you don't agree with everything that a particular figure says, you're ostracized from your tribe.
Yeah.
Because you have to believe everything or you believe nothing. Similarly, if I've ever listened to a Joe Rogan, I actually saw a guy, he was an Asian guy doing a presentation. You might have been hit with this ad on Instagram, and he's talking about how he was giving a speech and he mentioned that he listened to an episode of the Joe Rogan podcast and he said, I don't agree with everything Joe says or his guests, and some of them are lula. And he lost a quarter of his following. And he's like, hold on, I didn't say I agree with it. I just said I listened to him. But people are like, no, now you're the enemy.
Yes.
So this melting pot of emotion, I feel, is why, my opinion on why this stuff kind of does quite well. My issue with, I don't know the guy personally, but Stephen, is he doesn't push back or provide any sort of context. He just allows a free flow of this information. A lot of it's contradictory information as well. He allows a free flow of that information without any sort of context. So me as the listener, if I didn't have my own structure for filtering information, I'd just be out my mouth open. I just consume it all. Give it all the supplements. Give me all the supplements. So I think are we kind of on the same page there in terms of?
Absolutely. Like I'm not, there's something I heard recently, which was a really nice way of framing it. And there is this whole thing of like, sometimes people are like skeptical just because being skeptical about everything gives this illusion that you're this intellectual person, right? But I think if you are skeptical in a sense of like, right, I'm skeptical, there's a difference between skepticism and cynicism with a lot of this stuff. But I think, if you're skeptical in that you have this filter, as you described, Dan, that's really useful because it's like, right, I'm just not going to take everything at face value. However, it's also important to be flexible with your beliefs. Like if I'm talking to somebody and they provide me with, some sort of a resource or, specific good research that shows some sort of contrary piece of information to what I already believe around nutrition, I'd be more than happy to adopt that. Whether it's like, say for example, like we're going to talk about electrolytes or something like that. Like say for example,
reading my mind here.
like let's say for example, electrolytes, comes out in some new performance nutrition research that it's actually like the bee's knees. It's better than carbs. It's better than caffeine. This is extremely unlikely to happen, by the way, but let's assume that it does. And it's really good research. And I can see that, lots of people that I respect in the industry, like the ISSN and, Danny Lennon, Sigma Nutrition, all of these people are like taking it on board and saying, yes, this is good research. And it is actually, this shows, it adds, it's contrary to what we believed, but it's actually now showing us that, right, maybe electrolytes should be considered more seriously in like the sort of the foundation of performance nutrition that we need to bring in. Very happy to adopt that. And I think that's important, where you have this sort of balance between skepticism in terms of you're not willing to just take everything at face value. You're willing to sort of say, right, well, let's delve into that a little bit more. Let's actually, is there any evidence for what that person just said? Like, what's some other people that are very knowledgeable in this field? What are they saying? Is it contrary to that? And again, this is obviously part of the difficulty in terms of being a minefield. But equally, you also have to have flexibility with regards to your belief systems. And if it's like somebody can sit down with me and convince me of something, with good evidence and good rationale, good mechanistic rationale, whatever it is, then I'm quite happy to change my beliefs. I'm not married to my beliefs, but I do think that there are certain things that it's essentially conclusive that, say, for example, fiber is extremely good for human health. Like, it's just extremely good to have lots of fiber in your diet. It's extremely good to be managing your saturated fat levels, like keep your calories, 10% of your calories or less should be coming from saturated fat. It's generally, it's extremely good to have lots of fruits and vegetables in your diet. These things are like, we have so much evidence to suggest that all of that stuff is true now that it's like it would take, it would essentially be impossible basically for someone to come along and present good evidence that would be able to demolish that in a sense.
And according to Brian Johnson, Paul Saladino, Sean Baker, the boys are trying hard. I agree completely with you there. And I'll use an example, a personal example to put context on this to show how I've been dealing with this lately. You mentioned electrolytes there. I've sold on the sexiness of it all. And whether it was placebo or not, I probably just wasn't drinking enough water. I started to take Element. And it was just a nice experience for me because it tasted nice. It was in a sexy package.
For sure.
I was paying for it. So I was like, oh, if I'm paying for it, it must be working. And I put a post on Instagram and just talking about it in general. And Brian reached out. Brian presented me with the facts and he was like, here's what you get in a stick of Element versus here's what you can get from basic low salt from Tesco, and actually potassium, magnesium aren't as important as we think it is. But all the stuff is contrary to my beliefs. Not my educated beliefs.
Sure.
My beliefs I'd garnered from people maybe that I'd listened to or things like that.
Yeah.
But based on my new filter and system, I was like, you know what? I respect the people I listened to before, but I also respect Brian. So there's probably a mid-ground here.
Yeah.
Maybe I don't need to spend the money, and maybe I've bought the marketing. Maybe I can get the same result, and I'll take Brian's advice on board here.
Yeah.
Because everyone's kind of saying the same thing, just in slightly different ways. So now it's my job to listen to it all and decide myself.
Yeah.
Okay, here's where all of the roads intersect, and here's where I spend 40 quid less a month.
Yeah.
Maybe that's the best option for me.
Absolutely. And the financial, because again, this kind of comes back to what I was talking about earlier with regards to like people, consuming a piece of content from something on the diary of a CEO or Paul Saladino or some of these guys, and they have the supplement line, and then there's a big financial burden to keep up this, consistency of monthly bill of supplements, etc. And like, I think the financial aspect of your nutrition is really important, because this is quite a large barrier for people to eat healthily. Is this sense of like, people have the belief that healthy eating is going to it's going to be so expensive and I need to buy XYZ. And that's, again, it's a barrier from someone being able to get to the next level with their nutrition and for it to really have a strong effect on their health. Like even say, for example, organic, is another barrier. Doesn't seem to be any healthier necessarily. Some of the food tastes better. All right, I'll definitely give you that. Nutrient density doesn't seem to be any better. In many ways, frozen fruits and vegetables seem to have the best in terms of nutrient quality, because they're flash frozen and the nutrients are locked in a sense. But again, these are just things like, if you consider somebody that feels like they need to eat organic, they feel like they need to eat wild Alaskan caught salmon, they feel like they need to buy these supplements that's €150 a month. They feel like they need to be buying, all of these fancy like Theraguns and all these fancy foam rollers and, going to all these like infrared saunas and, all of this stuff that is in many ways purported by Diary of a CEO, Joe Rogan, etc. And it essentially gives people this sense of the barrier for you should be to get healthier here. I don't know if you can see this on the camera, but it should be really low. It shouldn't be high. Like, it shouldn't cost a lot for people to get into a gym and eat more fruits and vegetables and get better sleep. But because of all the bullshit online, people have this sense of, the barriers are way up here, because like I have to buy all these fancy supplements and I have to buy organic and I have to, do XYZ, and it's all very expensive. And that's extremely unhelpful. Yeah. And it really sort of grinds my gears. Like, part of the reason why I don't like a lot of this stuff is because it's just creating barriers and blocks for the general population to improve their health. And it's just creating this unnecessary sense of it's going to cost a bomb for you to get healthier. Because it's like, there's a lot of economic turmoil right now, and people are not necessarily in a good place with their money for a variety of reasons. And I think like even whenever you look at the nutritional epidemiology, disease risk across population, financial and economic status is a huge predictor of whether someone is going to be able to engage in health behaviors. So if you look at, say, for example, affluent areas in different cities, like they obviously have like the best health clubs. Those people are typically a little bit healthier, or healthier, just simply by virtue of the fact that they have better access and more resources to these health-related behaviors, whereas there's more barriers for people in this kind of lower economic status, and that's a huge problem for health promotion across the population.
Yeah, I think that's a very helpful way of looking at it in terms of the macro view of, in general, is the body of this advice making people more healthy or less sick or feel better or live a better life, as opposed to the specifics of each individual thing. And obviously find extreme. Here's a question, actually, a slightly different take on it as well. For some people who are listening who enjoy that type of lifestyle like that, and maybe they have the money.
Yeah.
Once a more expensive supplement or eating organic food is not necessarily causing any harm, have at it, like, I think is a fair comment. But this is not the only way, I think, should be the message.
Yeah.
And then, which we'll get to now, the outside of that is there are particular pieces of advice that are actually causing harm as well. So that's not necessarily helpful. But macro, big picture, we're trying to just remove friction, remove barriers. Because I don't know, maybe giving you your opinion on this, in most cases or many cases, when it comes to like metabolic health and stuff like that, or obesity or diabetes and most of the stuff that we see, most people are leaving a lot on the table that they could sort very easily without going down the route of any of this kind of complex stuff.
Yeah.
Like most people are probably under consuming protein or over consuming complex carbs or not getting enough exercise.
It's like the big rocks in the glass.
You know? Exactly.
So it's like, if you imagine, for people that's listening to this, imagine in your minds you have a glass and you have these big rocks, you have these pebbles, and you have the sand, right? So you can obviously fill the glass up with the different 3 components of it, but the big rocks are getting enough protein, eating lots of fruits and vegetables and, high fiber foods in general, eating enough calories to support whatever training, or potentially changing your calorie intake to get yourself to a healthier body fat level, exercising regularly, trying to get whatever sort of exercise that you enjoy. That's kind of like the most important thing in my opinion. But if you can get a mixture of resistance training and aerobic training, fantastic. Managing your sleep and managing your stress. That's the big rocks. Right, the pebbles in the sand then is like a few supplements, or maybe electrolytes, or maybe trying some sort of fancy protocol or whatever it is. Like, I think that there's definitely room for all of that. Again, if you have the financial capacity and it's something that you care about and you want to really engage in. But the big rocks is good nutrition that doesn't need to be super expensive, good regular exercise routine, but that is enjoyable and that allows you to be consistent with, good sleep. Which again, you can improve that for free, and then stress management techniques, which again, you can do that for free with different things like meditation and journaling, etc. All that kind of stuff. Again, some people might say, well, stress management can be a harder thing to work on, and for sure, like circumstantial life circumstances, history of mental health, all that kind of stuff comes into it. But generally speaking, those big rocks shouldn't cost a bomb for you to implement. And they don't need to be difficult for you to implement either.
Yeah, I actually did an episode with Robbie Bennett on from the ISI on stress management, and most of the stuff is free. It's just adaptation of your lifestyle and your environment and how you think about things and how you conduct yourself as well. It's the easy stuff, but again, that's not what we want to hear. We want the silver bullet. We want it sexy. And also, many people feel like, I'm not saying this is true or untrue, but feel like they have been let down by the system or whatever you want to call it. We won't go too deep into that now, but that will immediately qualify them to look outside that. And if somebody comes along to say, I have the answer and it's nothing to do with the system, like, oh, I'll try that because I've tried everything else. When in reality, have they? I've been training my entire life to play senior football. I still struggle to get the right amount of protein in every day. And I know what I need, and I know how much better I feel and how much better I train, and I still struggle. I speak to people like yourself all the time, I'm immersed in this world, and I struggle. So I haven't tried it all. And if I was to sit down with you in 5 minutes, be like, well, Dan, this is what you can't get in. You're not planning it, blah, 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 blah. So the average person, again, who is that? But most people, you have a massive scope for improving your health and your wellness there without putting your hand in your pocket.
Absolutely.
Realistically. And that's actually one area you're quite good at as well, is showing people easy sources of protein and affordable ways of getting all this stuff in. But to stay on track and keep debunking, because you mentioned carnivore, we've mentioned poor old Paul Saladino many, many times already in this podcast. We're only 25 minutes in. I will give you my journey through the whole carnivore thing. When I first heard about carnivore, it was like everything else for me. It was like, sounds a bit extreme to me, probably not necessary, but Joe Rogan's doing it and he lost loads of weight and he looks great. And never mind the growth hormone and the TRT and whatever else he's taken. Then I progressed on to, well, it's essentially an elimination diet. So most people will probably have an initial good response because they're cutting out all the shit out of their life anyway. And then I moved on to, this feels like it might be harmful for most people because most people aren't going to have the genetics, the lifestyle, the physiology to sustain something as extreme as this. So that was my journey through carnivore. And that's kind of where I am at the moment. I appreciate someone like Paul Saladino's passion for what he does, but now having been in the world of media, I kind of understand the absolute devotion to picking this one thing and hammering it to absolute death. So with carnivore, this is one of those areas where something can actually be dangerous and detrimental, not just bad advice, not just a bit of bro science that we have a bit of fun with. Would you speak to me a little bit about that chain of command you spoke about there?
So again, individual with a cluster of beliefs, potentially more conservative, listens to Joe Rogan, adopts the carnivore diet. This individual might have an awareness of genetically high cholesterol, might not. In many cases, they don't. Because again, it's probably someone young enough between the ages of like 20 and 40, like, which is generally the male 20 to 40, you're Joe Rogan, like literally guys like us, right?
Us, yeah.
So he adopts the carnivore diet, and these carnivore guys are like, don't worry about your LDL cholesterol. It's It's a myth that you need to worry about it. Yes, it might go up when you do this diet, but you're going to feel a lot better. He adopts the diet. He feels a lot better because his diet was shit before. And now he's eating, a lot of these kind of like animal-based foods. Animal-based foods can be extremely nutrient-dense and extremely healthy for you when you look at like the zinc and vitamin B vitamins and iron you get from red meat. When you look at the micronutrient density in egg yolks, when you look at, say, the micronutrient density of liver, all of these animal-based foods can be extremely nutrient-dense. Someone eats them from coming from a typical American Western diet pattern and they will feel better. No doubt about that. The problem then is they believe that, right, I can just absolutely just hoover the bacon into me on a daily basis and loads of fat and eat ghee and put butter in my coffee. I can do all this stuff. Skyrockets their LDL, but they're like, don't need to worry about this. Maybe they even go into the doctor and the doctor's like, bro, you need to like calm down with the saturated fat. We might need to put you on a statin. Again, it's like, fuck you, I'm not going on a statin. It's like, the pharma industry is bullshit, and it's like, it's corrupt. I'm not going on statins, and I'm not listening to you because this doctor on Joe Rogan says this, and I feel a lot better, and you don't know what my experience is. And then the doctor only has 10 minutes with the person. It's a disaster. Continues on this diet pattern. Again, as I said at the start, this individual has familial hypercholesterolemia, so he has a genetic high cholesterol. Is going to do much better on a low saturated fat, high fiber diet, potentially with a statin. Again, I'm not a doctor, so I'm not going to actually speak on the statins, but it does seem to be, that's the kind of like the best intervention for somebody with high cholesterol. Has a cardiovascular event when he's 45, potentially dies, or is, potentially like put into ill health because of this. And again, the problem with this is, say, for example, something like high cholesterol or high blood pressure is they're a bit insidious, because it's not like, say, if you've arthritis or something like that, where there's actually symptoms and you can like feel it in your body, whereas like high cholesterol and high blood pressure, there's not that many symptoms. There can be with high blood pressure, but it's not something that necessarily reveals itself to you unless you're testing for it from a blood work perspective until you've had a cardiovascular event, a stroke or a heart attack or something like that. And that's the problem. This is not something that necessarily manifests itself in a year or 5 years, maybe even 10 years. But it is something that can literally kill someone, in a sense, by virtue of the fact that they have been consuming all of this bro content around the carnivore diet, and again, all of this sort of like anti-establishment thinking and belief structures. And this is kind of why it's quite sad, and it's quite problematic when it comes to the likes of Sean Baker, Paul Saladino, Jordan Peterson, Michaela Peterson purporting these diets, because again, the guy might feel better, and he might improve his health and everything. And again, this is the problem, because like present moment experience is real visceral. It feels, it's the feeling that you get on a day-to-day basis if your health is improved from like a shitty diet to a carnivore diet can absolutely be beneficial. And again, like even from a perspective of like elimination diets and stuff like that people utilize for IBS, a lot of people say, oh, my IBS was sorted whenever I went on the carnivore diet. I'm like, yeah, that's because you pulled all the fermentable short chain carbohydrates from your diet, but you didn't need to pull them all out. You only need to pull out 2. But again, sorry, that was more of a tangent. But yeah, basically it's this chain of command that someone might start, this journey that they may go on when they're like 25. And then when they're like, if they're continuing along that path, maybe in their 30s and 40s, they have some serious health complications due to their decisions that they made based off information they consumed online.
Very, very eloquently put there. There seems to be levels to this, right? So feel free to jump in here and pin me to the wall on anything I say that you think might be out of order here, or maybe I'm missing the point a little bit. Obviously, you mentioned a few names there, and one, where did you get such a good Jordan Peterson impression?
Practice.
I'm a general Peterson fan. I like his message. I'm not. There's real areas of what he says that I'm like, I can leave that. But that's just what I do now. I cherry pick what I like and what I don't like. The nutrition stuff is a complete no for me. It was like, Jordan, get back in line then. When Michaela started talking about carnivore and all that, I was like, these are not the type of people I go to for my nutrition advice.
Sure.
All that aside, they're trying to do well, but again, massive platform. They just have to be very, very careful. I think there's a responsibility there. Levels to this game, there will be a small cohort of people who actually can do well, which is probably Paul Saladino, Brian Johnson, apart from the 27 grand of stuff he was taking everyone, Sean Baker, these kind of guys genetically maybe are either getting away with it, is probably the best way to put it. Maybe it's not ideal. Or it's something to do with their makeup, very, very small cohort of people, or people who are already in excellent health who can manage something like this, something extreme like this for their body. Very, very small cohort of people. The vast majority of people, I think, who consume this information don't have any of those prerequisites for maybe getting away with this. I'm not just talking about carnivore, I'm talking about any sort of extreme diet there. So level 1, level 2. The willingness to consume this information we spoke about already and just apply it because it was on Joe Rogan, it's in your tribe, you've got your cluster beliefs, etc., etc. The cholesterol piece you mentioned there is an interesting one. It's something I've spoken about to people for years, and it's very, very hard to get a consensus on this. Very, very hard. So where I'm kind of interested at the moment is the advice you would get when you go to your average GP. I know a lot of GPs were extremely, extremely well educated and very progressive, for want of a better word. They'll educate themselves. They understand lifestyle, they understand diet. They'll bring a cohort of experts in. Very impressive setup stuff. I'm really, really impressed by that. But the average GP who last studied anything about cholesterol, statins, diet, lifestyle 25 years ago, and when it was already out of date, you go in, you have high cholesterol, you get a statin. Maybe the conversation I've heard is maybe have some flora on your scone the next time. Okay. Again, that's not necessarily helpful advice here, but I understand their responsibility. That this is the intervention that we have for this particular condition. Your cholesterol is elevated, we have to give you a statin. So within that conversation, there are various different levels. If I go in as somebody who maybe monitors my blood work, I'm quite healthy, I feel good, I don't have any risk factors, my cholesterol is slightly elevated, but my diet looks good. There could be something else going on there. I'm not going to jump at a statin straight away. Not because I'm anti-establishment. Because I understand there's probably more I can do here before taking the supplement, taking the medication. But again, there's an authority there as well. So people get ridiculed who are questioning maybe I don't want to go down this route straight away. Rogan, carnivore head, go on keto, you're going to eat bacon every morning. So it's very, very hard for anybody to actually have dialogue. And sometimes, not all the time, people in the authority position get very offended by this as well. So if I not question my doctor, but question are there other options here? I'm your doctor, take your statin or get out of my office, can also be the reply. Sometimes.
Which isn't helpful either.
So very, very confusing people. And that's why I say there's levels to this entire thing. So while I don't believe that any extreme diet is particularly helpful, cleaning up your diet and eliminating most of that stuff can be particularly helpful. So again, take all the information and filter it down. And with the cholesterol piece, where are you at the moment in terms of the statins and all that kind of stuff? Have you got a kind of a go-to, I know not a go-to intervention for somebody, but like if I was to come in and ask you as a 35-year-old man and my cholesterol is slightly elevated, but here's my diet, what are you looking for straight away?
So the two things that is going to have the three things that's going to have the biggest impact is managing healthy body fat levels. So get yourself down into a healthy body fat. If that is, if you're, again, there's problems with BMI, but I'm going to use it anyway. So if your BMI is overweight to obese, getting that down to a healthy level is going to be useful. Again,
that's fat shaming.
It's fat shaming. Cancelled. Immediately cancelled.
We're off here.
So, using BMI can be useful there to some degree. If someone wants to think about it from a body fat percentage, like I would say, like if you're like 25% as a man or something like that, 30%, getting that down. Even losing, say, if you're in that category of overweight to obese, even getting that down by like 5 kilos, 3 kilos even can have a beneficial effect. So that's the first thing. Get yourself into a healthy body.
Can I ask you before you go on, sorry to interrupt you there, is it fairly universally accepted now that reducing, if you're in unhealthy levels of body fat, reducing that is a good thing?
Oh yeah,
across the board.
Absolutely. And again, this is a problem with like health at every size and all this jazz, right?
Yeah, politics and society and culture aside, it's fairly universally accepted.
It's pretty universally accepted. Okay. Yeah. And again, some people are like, "Oh no, the research shows this." It's like realistically, when you look at the effects that excess adiposity or fat tissue on the body has, like even just from an inflammatory perspective, getting that down to a healthy range is going to have really good effects on your body. And again, there is ranges here as well. Like, even whenever you look at your blood work, everything's within a range. It's not like, has to be this. So sure, some people might have a genetic set point that is of higher body fat. But like, again, there is, even if your genetic set point of body fat is a bit higher, whatever it is, if your lifestyle is contributing to you being 10% body fat higher or 15 kg heavier than you should be, getting that down into the normal, into a healthier range for you is going to have substantial effects on your health, specifically with regards to like cholesterol levels and stuff like that, but also, just in general, you're just going to feel so much better, and, blood glucose control, insulin sensitivity, etc. So the body fat piece is the first thing. The second thing then is the sort of the split of your fats that you eat in the day. So we generally want most of our fats to come from PUFAs and MUFAs, so polyunsaturated fats and monounsaturated fats. This is just primarily the fats that's coming from plant-based foods, your nuts and your seeds and your avocados, etc. Right? This is not to say that don't eat any saturated fat. It's actually impossible to eat no saturated fat anyway, because fats in different foods are like in specific proportions. Like there's saturated fat in olive oil, for example, but it's still really good for you. So you want to try and keep your saturated fat to about less than 10% of your calories, or less than 1/3 of your total fat basically should be coming from saturated fat. And again, this is something that you can track specifically if you've ever used MyFitnessPal or anything like that, that you can actually track this over the course of a week or a number of weeks to get a better idea of this. So saturated fat, keep it a bit lower, keep it lower than 10% if you can, as a generally good guideline, and have more of your fats coming from PUFAs and MUFAs. Third thing then is the fiber content of your diet. So this is where your fruits and vegetables come in. So fiber seems to have pretty profound effects on your health, even well up into like really high intakes of fiber, like 50, 60 grams. And it has a bunch of different beneficial effects in terms of cholesterol lowering effects, improvements in gut health. Like getting a diverse range of high fiber plant-based foods, fruits and vegetables is, to me, the current most reliable way to improve your gut health. Probiotics and all that aside, fermented foods, there's scope in that. But fruit and vegetables, high fiber foods, nuts and seeds and whole grains, that's where it's at. So you're just going to feel healthier. You're going to have better digestion and gut health. Your cholesterol, it's going to have good effects on your blood lipids. And even just from a perspective of linking back to the first point around fat loss, if you need to lose body fat, one of the best ways to do that is to eat a high fiber, high protein diet. That's what's going to make the process of you losing body fat easier. And downstream, it's going to have an effect on your health in all of these manners, as we discussed.
Okay, lovely, absolutely lovely. I'm going to start to rapid fire these a little bit more at you now here, because
sure.
you're in the flow, I feel, here now.
Yeah,
so, what about, going back to Mr. Saladino, we want more fiber, we want more vegetables, we want more fruits. What about these harmful chemicals in plants that protect themselves and don't want to be eaten, that are going to cause us to be really sick?
Yeah. So he talks about like the oxalates and stuff like that and anti-nutrients. There's definitely some scope to that, but when you look at, say, for example, he talks about like, don't eat oats. Oats are terrible for you and all this kind of stuff, because he talks about, the interruption to the absorption of nutrients and stuff like that. Definitely a consideration, but that's like a small consideration that can be removed by either, say, for example, like soaking your oats in water or cooking some of these foods, like say these plant-based foods that have the anti-nutrients. If you cook them, it actually reduces the effect of the anti-nutrients. Or even just like not eating certain things at the same time. Like say, for example, like high fiber foods might interrupt the absorption of like iron and zinc, right? So, just eat kind of like, maybe if you're trying to get your iron levels up, maybe you just have like your steak with maybe a lower fiber amount of vegetables or something like that in that particular meal. So again, it's one of those things where it's like he's saying, don't eat oats. Oats are terrible because of anti-nutrients. And it's like, right, anti-nutrients has this effect, but the effect that the beta-glucans and, the range of nutrients that you get from eating oats has this effect on your health. And it's so much better for you to be eating oats. Like the benefits that you get from eating oats from a perspective of the structure of a bowl of porridge versus the negative of some potential, anti-nutrient that might be in this food or whatever it is. The disparity there is massive, and it's actually not a major consideration for me whenever I'm recommending something. Again, it's stepping over dollars to pick up dimes.
Okay, yeah, I like that, and starting to be a little bit more critical about how you evaluate it. This understanding that imbalance there. Okay, I love that.
Yeah.
You mentioned insulin monitoring. there, and glucose levels. A big increase lately I've seen in people wearing constant glucose monitors and getting really invested in insulin spikes throughout the day and inflammation and stuff like this.
Yeah.
Where do you stand on this issue?
Yeah. So like, I think, if you are excessive about your monitoring of your blood glucose and eat lots of fruit, it's gonna, like, fruit will have an insulin spiking effect, but sure, so will dairy. As I always say to people, like, carbs are not the only thing that's insulinogenic. Protein is as well. Like, if you have a scoop of whey protein or, some yogurt or whatever, like if you have, say, a breakfast of, high protein, low fat yogurt and fruit, that's actually going to be quite insulinogenic. But when you look at the actual nutrient composition of that meal, the effect that it has on satiety, what you're getting from that, provided that you're not a diabetic and it's not something that you need to be meticulous about. Again, it's the same thing as we talked about the porridge. The benefit that you get from that versus the sort of the purported negatives of an insulin spike, even though, like, these kind of like changes in spikes in blood glucose and stuff like that, these are like normal things that occur. We don't need to pathologize this once you don't have a medical condition like diabetes. And that's the problem with it. It's this, people are pathologizing things that, that are not really a problem. It's normal enough for people to have spikes in their blood glucose. It's normal enough for people to consume food and not fully absorb all of the nutrients in it, etc. Like, because of like whatever anti-nutrients. So again, this is kind of like the excessive monitoring of blood glucose is it's making people focus on something intently that is unhelpful. It's not actually improving their health in any degree. But again, it's potentially creating more health anxiety in a sense, because it's like, oh, fuck, I'm after eating, a bowl of watermelon there, or, something that's, higher in protein. Like, I'm after having like a whey protein smoothie after the gym or something like that, and it's spiked my blood glucose. And then it's like, maybe that puts them off having that.
Yeah.
And then it's like, but that's actually a beneficial thing for you to have. So again, this is why I'm I'm quite a minimalistic person in general, and especially so with my nutrition. And I'm just like whatever we can do to make this process of you eating healthier as easy and as approachable and as attractive as possible, let's do that. Let's not complicate it any more than is necessary. And I feel like these CGMs and sort of this excessive monitoring of even like, even people getting like their bloods done to an excessive extent where it's like, they're really just like trying to get everything in line perfectly. You're essentially trying to shoot for something that is just not really that necessary for you to be engaging in. And, in many ways, because of how it might make you feel from a perspective of like health monitoring, and how you like, even like another part of this is like the Whoops and like the, the fitness devices, the wearables and stuff like that. Again, it's like, oh, my sleep score is terrible today. Better not train. And it's like, no, it's like, the sleep score is shite, but how do you feel? And it's like, I feel fine. Go and fucking train. Like, so it's kind of like CGMs are kind of in that sort of sphere of like getting into the weeds on a topic that you don't really need to, and it's not going to benefit you if you're a normal person.
You've actually answered half the question I was just about to ask you there, but to ask the second part of that question with over monitoring and excessive, because I've had conversations with many people that I respect with literally polarized views on this.
Sure.
Over monitoring your bloods for things like insulin spikes, testosterone, hormone levels, stuff like that, in order to try and preempt, for example, if you notice a pattern that might have you on a path towards being pre-diabetic,
sure,
for example, or you start to notice your testosterone is beginning to decline.
Absolutely.
You can maybe intervene before it becomes an issue. Do you think, general population aside, who have all the big rocks to deal with first? Because there's some people I know who would class themselves as, and not my favorite word, used to be my favorite word, biohackers. Or people who want to optimize health, which I like the concept of. Who have most of the big rocks in a line. Is there benefit to be found for those people in that type of, not excessive, because this is the context for the word is important. In that type of consistent monitoring, could they potentially be able to prevent pre-diabetes. Now, that's unlikely going to be diabetic if they're taking care of their health anyway, but pre-diabetes, hormone issues and stuff like that. Is there a place for that cohort of people? Because a lot of them would be listening to this podcast.
Yeah. Like, absolutely. Like, say, for example, like if you get your blood test done and you can see your HbA1c, which is a longer term marker of like the health of from a blood glucose perspective, and insulin sensitivity and stuff like that. Like that's absolutely helpful. And I feel like there is also a place for the people that really want to optimize things. There is that sort of like 5% where it's like, right, maybe you want to try out this supplement that is like, we don't have a huge amount of research to suggest that it's helpful. But again, it has to be within this range of, okay, is doing this intervention creating more stress in your life than it is worth? And that's from a perspective of financial stress, but also, as I say, pathologizing things that we don't need to be pathologizing and creating health anxiety. If you have the financial capacity for trying out some of these more in-depth things around your health, and you're happy that it's not going to really affect how you feel about engaging in the big rocks in many ways. Like, as I say, this is my problem with some of the wearables. It's like my sleep score is shit, so I'm not going to train today or whatever it is. Like, that's...
You miss out on the training, which is a big rock.
That's a net negative, Then it's absolutely fine. Like, and I'm all for, because like I have some clients where they're like, oh, what do you think of this supplement? Like, the sleep supplement, say, for example, the sleep stack or whatever. And I'm just like, you know what? Like, if it's something you're really interested in, your sleep is fucking rock solid here. Let's give it a spin here for 6 weeks. But we want to monitor it. Let's say, for example, let's monitor your sleep and see if there is an effect from taking the sleep supplement, whatever it is. Again, it's not like the research on, say, glycine for sleep is not as strong, nowhere near as strong as, say, creatine for strength performance. They're in two completely different categories. But there is some people will have anecdotal experience that glycine improves their sleep, and maybe there is some research there as well. But again, it's one of those things that you test it out, test these things out. As I say, like, do a testing period with lots of different things and see if it has a beneficial effect on your sleep or your recovery or your general health markers or whatever.
One thing at a time, ideally.
Yeah,
it's kind of like a hierarchy of health needs, really, isn't it?
Yeah.
Most of us are on the bottom 1 or 2 levels, like Maslow's hierarchy. But if you are at actualization phase and you've got the cash and you've got the time, test this stuff out. And also, I spoke to Sean Canan about this, about wearables and stuff before, as a single point of information, they're pretty useless because the algorithms vary so widely. But when tested against themselves in the context of your health, in the context of the lifestyle that you're living and monitoring, they can be useful.
Absolutely.
My baseline is this, and then I did this, and then my baseline is this. Yeah. You can't compare that to someone who has a Garmin and someone who has a Whoop and someone. It doesn't compare.
Yeah.
But for yourself, they can be pretty useful.
For sure.
Because this is what I started at. Yeah. This is the intervention, and this is how it changed. 10% change. Yeah. Okay, interesting there.
Yeah.
But as a standalone, your sleep score is 72. Oh, bollocks. It's actually a load of shit.
Yeah.
It is a load of shit. And I was about to do a deep dive and get the Whoops and the R's and everything. And then I caught myself and I said, you know what?
Yeah.
I know when I feel good and I know when I feel shit.
Yeah.
So do more of the stuff that makes me feel good.
Your body's really reliable.
Yeah.
In a sense, especially whenever you've developed some body literacy, as I like to call it.
Okay.
So this is something it's actually something that I use more with my female clients around kind of like, their hormonal health and stuff like that. Like, how do you feel whenever you're, at different parts of your cycle? But, body literacy in terms of like having some sort of introspective awareness around kind of like how you feel, levels of soreness, little aches and pains and stuff like that. And, you can sort of combine that body literacy with your wearables, and sort of then you can weigh it up and say, right, the Whoop is saying don't train, but I feel okay and I'm not sore, and when I look at my training log, everything is running as I want, then train.
Yeah.
Equally, if it's like, right, the Whoop says I should be, on the floor here, and I do feel like I'm about to like die in a sense, like, maybe you feel like you're getting sick or something like that. There's some strong evidence that you probably should pull it back for the day or day or two.
Caveat there, this is not a judgment piece though. It does create a handy escape hatch for people though.
Yeah.
To like this intuitive training and stuff like that. Yeah. You want to make sure you have some sort of structure around your mindset and stuff too.
Yes.
Because I never feel like training.
Yeah.
And if I was like, I'm really tired today. When I get the session done, I'm like, I smashed that session.
Yeah.
Body is fine. That little escape button is always there if I just go on my intuition. So having your own accountability system, I personally found is very, very helpful. And because most time you don't want to eat the good food and you don't want to, and the chocolate bar is right there, and you're like, I feel a bit off today. I'll just have the chocolate bar.
Absolutely. Like, there is a difference between I couldn't be fucked and Jesus,
I was wondering when we were going to get to the cursing, because we both said we'd be fucking cursing here. We haven't really cursed at all. Yeah, there's a difference.
There is a difference, but you learn that over time. You know, like say for example, like, you know, if I do 2 sessions in a day, let's say I do a big leg session and a jiu-jitsu session with lots of hard sparring in the evening, it's like there's a good likelihood that my body's response to that will be, you need a little bit more sleep and maybe don't train tomorrow. Like say, for example, one thing that I did recently, just because we're on this topic of like, you know, auto-regulation and letting your body guide you a little bit. I did a lot of heavy Romanian deadlifts at the weekend, and then I did a lot of wrestling on maybe the day after. So when I went into the gym, what day are we on? We're on Thursday. So essentially what happened was I did a lot of kind of like posterior back training, and then I did a lot of wrestling, which is, you know, can be difficult on the sort of the spinal erectors and stuff like that. So when I went in to do my next gym session, my lower back was still a little bit achy. So what I did was, instead of doing my bent over rows, I did a T-bar row, and I reduced the amount of lower back related exercises in that particular session. I still did everything else, you know. So that was just an example of like, right, I'm just sort of tuning into what my body is saying here a little bit, and I am just regulating and adjusting things just to that little piece. And then maybe in a couple of days, I'll be like, right, I didn't do my bent over rows when I should have that day, so I'll put them in here whenever my lower back's a little bit more ready for it.
And also because you have structure and accountability around your training due to, is Paddy's doing
Paddy,
it?
Paddy coaches me,
Paddy, you're able to just understand that I can take this out, but this will slot nicely in and still maintain the program, as opposed to back feels a bit sore, fuck back today.
Yeah.
And it's a free for all. It's an absolute free for all. Yeah. The Narcos video, was that creatine? Was it? Because I want to jump to creatine. Or was that whey protein?
No, that was cocaine.
What was the message creatine, or was it whey protein?
It was creatine. Yeah, I think you're talking about the creatine in the airport, or the
you sniffing the powder off.
The one where I'm wearing the glasses. So that's creatine. I think it's like a 10-second reel or something like that, where it's like there's protein and creatine in it, but I think the focus was the creatine.
I shit myself laughing that. If you haven't seen that one, check it out. But I'm going to give you some bro pro and bro con creatine. Bro cons, it's a steroid. It's going to destroy your liver. It is illegal. It's going to give you acne. It's going to kill you. Bro pro, it is going to make up for every other gap in your strength and conditioning, and it's going to make you a super athlete. So take creatine all the time. Yeah. Another consideration around creatine, it is a very potent, and the word is literally jumped out of my head there, caffeine, neuro, you know what I'm trying to say here?
Ergogenic aid.
But what do they call it? Methylene blue is one, caffeine is one, neurological stimulant. Jesus Christ, gone out of my head.
Nootropic.
I speak about it all the time. I don't know how I forgot that word. Okay, so there's the pros and cons.
Yeah.
What's creatine? Because I mean, it comes up so often. It's still, and like I've talked to many people about creatine before. It's the number one most researched sports supplement in the world. And still, I have grown-ass men coming up to me with both bro perspectives. You shouldn't be taking that. All I do is take creatine on my toast in the morning. Like, what's creatine? Give us creatine.
Yeah, so creatine is actually naturally occurring. Like, we all have a certain amount of creatine stores.
Does our liver produce a gram a day?
Yeah, we generally produce around 1 to 2 grams per day. And you'll also get, like, part of that is like, general production within the body. It's smaller amounts, but if you eat meat and fish and animal products, you're getting it from there. What you're trying to do with creatine supplementation is you're trying to get your muscle creatine stores to a saturation point that is higher than what you get, from normal production and through meat and fish, basically. So basically what it does is it provides an additional energy source for high intensity efforts of around like 10 seconds or less. So sprints and heavy lifts and, powerful throws, like I'm thinking in jiu-jitsu, if you're going for like a takedown or something like that, something that's bursty, as I like to call it, bursty, bursty sort of efforts. Because we have these like, limited energy sources in the muscle, ATP, certain small amounts of ATP, which is your body's energy currency, and then smaller amounts of creatine that we can utilize to create energy rapidly, but it runs out very fast, basically. So what creatine supplementation does is you consume the powder, or even just through like your diet and stuff like that, saturates the muscle content, and the muscle cell content of creatine provides more of that quick energy for those high intensity efforts That means you might be able to sprint a little bit longer, or you might get an extra couple of reps in the gym whenever you're doing a squat or a deadlift or a bench press or whatever.
It's like Vin Diesel pressing the NOS button in the drag race. He's got 7
turbo.
seconds of turbocharge.
Exactly. And again, like it's one of those things where it's like, it's not going to change your world. It's not going to change your life. But if you extrapolate those additional couple of reps that you get across a macro cycle or across a training cycle, throughout the year, if you're consistently taking it, it can have a beneficial effect. Again, I would probably, if we're talking about those big rocks, it's probably like a pebble.
Okay.
It's definitely, supplements are they're definitely not a big rock for me. But in the realm of supplements, it's one of my favorites, and it's very well researched, and it seems to be effective in performance nutrition and for athletes.
It's not a steroid?
It's not a steroid.
Does it affect your liver, kidneys?
No. Provided you have healthy kidneys and healthy liver, you're all good.
You're good to go.
Yeah.
All these fancy forms outside of creatine monohydrate, any micronized creatine, all bullshit?
Unnecessary. Again, you're just footing an additional bill for your supplements each month. There's no research that shows that creatine ethyl ester or creatine HCl or any of these other sort of forms of creatine are any more effective than creatine monohydrate. They always say to people, get monohydrate, go to Body First Nutrition. I always like to promote Ray's. Ray does his own brand of creatine. It's just Creo, and it's the cheapest that you can get. It's like, you get a 2 month supply for like €25 or something like that, or maybe even less. So, because again, the dosage for creatine is 3 to 5 grams. Do
you need a loading phase?
You don't need a loading phase. You will. So let's say, for example, you're supplementing with it for the first time. You want to saturate those creatine stores faster. The loading phase will get you to that point a little bit quicker. So if you do 20 grams a day for about a week or so, you'll get to that saturation point a little bit faster. But again, if you just start supplementing with it normally 3 to 5 grams daily for 3 to 4 weeks, you'll get to that point anyway. So it's not necessary, but it can be useful.
Any long-term negatives? Do you have to cycle on and off?
No, certainly not. Like the only time that you might want to pull it is if you're in a weight-based sport, because it will cause a little bit of additional water retention. It's not, people are like, it'll make me look watery, it's going to make me look, bloated or whatever. It's not, because it's sitting in the muscle cell. It's going to pull that water into it. If anything, it might make you look a little bit more full, like whenever you have more carbs.
Okay, perfect. I did read a little bit about maybe not taking it directly before sport for GI reasons. That's true.
Some people do get like cramps, stomach cramps whenever they take it. But again, when you consistently take it, that should go away. And if that is you can split your dose. So go like 2 grams, something like that. So split 2 grams in the morning, 2 grams in the evening. And that should sort you out. And make sure to drink water with it as well.
Do you need to increase your water intake?
It's just basically so that when you're taking it, if you're getting a bit of stomach cramps, just drink like, say, 200 mils of water, 250 mils of water if you're experiencing those stomach cramps. Like, I just throw it into the mouth down the hatch, and I just have it normally. But that's just, I'm used to it. It doesn't create any sort of GI distress for me. But if someone's listening to this and they do have a little bit of issues with it from a gastrointestinal perspective, split the dose and just make sure you're drinking water with it. That should sort you out.
Okay. If you have creatine you've had for a while and it clumps up a little bit in the bag, still okay to take it?
Still okay. It's basically just a little bit of moisture has got in and it's just sort of clumped up a little bit. Generally speaking, that will happen like a lot of supplements, and that's why they put those little silica gels in whenever they're sending it to you. But it's absolutely fine. Like it's just basically one of the things that, like, on that note as well, is creatine will degrade into creatinine if you leave it in water. So one thing that you shouldn't do is put it into water and leave it there, because it will degrade if you just leave it sitting in water. There is also something like around potentially putting it in hot water. It will dissolve faster in hot water, but it can also degrade some of the quality of it as well. So don't put it in like piping hot drinks.
Yeah.
Or if you're taking it, just try and have it with normal room temperature water if you can.
Yeah, I heard warm water before, but the claim was it increased absorption. Is there any truth to that?
Not that I'm aware of.
Not really.
No.
Okay. Now, if anybody asks me a question about creatine after that masterclass, I swear to God, I'm just going to point it back to this. I'm going to clip this, James. We're going to clip that bit about creatine there, and that's just going to be the masterclass of creatine.
Lovely.
Thank you very much for that. We're on the sports supplement, in the sports supplement realm, BCAAs and EAAs.
Sure.
So my bro science, what I've heard, where I am at the moment, is BCAAs pointless. EAAs potentially, because they've got that extra amino acid in there.
Sure.
But Is that true? And is there any need to supplement with BCAAs and EAAs? Now, I know that's a very subjective question, but in general, are they effective?
Sure.
For the cost and stuff, yeah.
Let's just talk about what they are first.
Yeah.
So, branched-chain amino acids and essential amino acids are a supplement of, the different isolated amino acids. So, amino acids are essentially the structural components of protein that you eat on a daily basis, right? So, the different proteins that you eat from the different sources will have different proportions of certain amino acids. So, say, for example, like collagen is very low in most of the amino acids, but it's very high in proline, hydroxyproline, and glycine, right? Some of the vegan proteins will be lower in the likes of leucine, but they might be a little bit higher in certain ones, and that's why they say combine plant-based proteins together to sort of make up for the reductions in reduced amounts of amino acids in certain ones. Essentially, with BCAAs, you're getting the branched chain amino acids, so this subsection of amino acids of leucine, isoleucine, and valine, and they're basically they have a role specifically to play in muscle building, basically, especially leucine. Leucine is a signaling molecule that essentially tells the body spike muscle protein synthesis. But we need all of the essential amino acids. The essential amino acids are the ones that we can't create endogenously in our body. We need to consume them through food, basically, and this is why the animal-based proteins are typically talked about as better quality, because they provide a complete amino acid profile. So the BCAAs only provide the 3 branched chain amino acids, but you need all of the essential amino acids that you get in an EAA supplement to actually fully incorporate those proteins into new muscle tissue. So the problem is with BCAAs, yes, there might be benefits from a signaling perspective in terms of like, right, you've got the leucine, that'll tell the body do XYZ, signaling cascade. But the problem is that if you're not providing the other ones, you're not actually going to get the benefits from a muscle building perspective, right? Now, do I think that EAAs are better than BCAAs? Yes. Do I think that you need to supplement with either? No, I don't think you do. Certainly if it's a case of like, and this kind of like the electrolyte thing we were talking about earlier, if you have a brand of EAAs that you like, well, just from a perspective of flavoring your water, fire away. And if you're a vegan or something like that and you're having a meal that's a little bit lower in some of the BCAAs or the essential amino acids, potentially an EAA supplement can be useful there. But if you're just eating like normal animal-based proteins, or if you're a vegan combination of like rice and beans or whatever it is, or you're consuming whey protein, you're getting all those amino acids anyway, provided that you're having a 20-gram serving, 25 gram serving. You're mostly maximizing the muscle protein synthetic response from just bog standard protein that you get in your food or from whey protein. So there's no benefit to BCAAs. You're essentially just, again, wasting your money. However, if it is a case of like, right, I like the flavor of this EAA supplement, and I want to get maybe just a little bit of extra amino acids that are going to have maybe some minor benefit from a muscle protein synthetic response, then fire away with the EAAs. But it's not something I recommend because, again, I'm very minimalistic with my supplement recommendations. So
yeah, okay, very comprehensive answer. That's actually the best answer I've heard on the topic there. And just as a common theme here as well, supplements are just that, supplements. So you can do all of this through your diet pretty much, unless there's a specific condition. But that doesn't mean that you shouldn't necessarily consider a supplement if you're struggling to get the nutrition in on occasion. But if that's a lifestyle thing, if that's a constant thing, maybe look at having someone help you design your diet a little bit better.
For sure. It's the same thing with like vitamins and minerals. If you're a vegan, it's going to be quite difficult for you to get B12 in your vegan food. So you probably do need to supplement with it. But again, it's just basically, it's in the word, supplementary to your diet.
Yeah. I think we forget that sometimes. It's literally in the word. A very, very brief touch on whey protein. The reason I bring this up is because, again, everyone knows what whey protein is, or protein supplementation in general. Personally, I have found, if I do use these supplements, that the advice given to me was to try and minimize dairy. Now, I know you have a thing on this with gluten as well. Like, if I don't have an issue with dairy, I don't necessarily have an issue with dairy.
Sure.
I seem to struggle a little bit. I have hay fever and stuff like that.
Sure.
It seems to flare. I don't know if it's real or not when I consume a lot of dairy. So I just manage my dairy. I haven't eliminated dairy. I enjoy dairy. And that seems to manage it. But whey protein, and I've tried beef isolate protein, and I seem to just do better from a gastro point of view and a flare-up of kind of nasally symptoms point of view. So I've definitely found that there.
Absolutely.
Do you have an opinion on Whey protein, beef protein, pea protein, etc.?
Yeah, like I think the dairy conversation, there's a lot of anecdotal reports of like, say sinus flare-ups and like even things with like acne and stuff like that. So I'm not opposed to someone saying if I reduce my dairy, I see improvements in that. So that's absolutely fine. And I'll, if a client says that to me, it's like, right, here's some alternatives, soy protein, beef protein, whatever it is. So I think like, like generally speaking, the protein powders are fairly similar in terms of amino acid composition. So, if it is whey protein, if it is soy protein, beef protein, egg protein, or a vegan blend, they're all to me like pretty rock solid in a sense. Like, so just if you have a particular type that works best with you from a digestive perspective, fire away with that. One of my clients, she has like some IBS related symptoms. So what she was finding that like, when I take this brand of whey protein, I get a bit of issues. But when I take this one, I don't. What's the story there? And that's what I was saying to her. The second one that she was taking is a whey isolate. So a whey isolate basically goes through a further filtration process that pulls out a lot of the carbs and fats that would be in whey protein concentrate. And in that filtration process, it pulls out the lactose, which is one of the sugar. It's the sugar in milk, basically. And that's kind of one of the sugars, basically, that creates a little bit of issues from a digestive perspective. So if someone's listening to this and they maybe want to try out some different whey proteins and you have some issues with bog standard whey protein, try a whey isolate. That might actually improve the sort of the digestibility that you get from that.
Yeah, anecdotally, I actually found that as well.
Yeah.
When My Protein released a whey isolate version,
yeah,
I definitely feel it, and it tastes delicious. Like,
yeah.
On the dairy question, this is great. You're cracking through these, man. It's very impressive. On the dairy issue, the comment we always hear is milk from cows is for baby cows, not for us. We're not designed to break down those proteins. Don't have the digestive enzymes. Give me some feedback on that one.
Yeah, like we've been consuming milk and dairy-based products for a large proportion of our history. There is going to be differences in terms of like, depending on where you are in the world, you'll have higher levels of lactose intolerance and stuff like that. But generally speaking, like I think the dairy, when you look at the research, it's a very much a net positive food to be having in your diet. Really good protein. Good micronutrient profile like calcium. Them bones need calcium. The milk adds B vitamins, etc. So it's a good food to have in your diet. And like for me, like I'm bulking right now, so like I'd be fucking lost without milk.
Really, yeah.
I like full fat milk, full fat Greek yogurt, Muju, chocolate milks. That's really assisting me in sort of being able to get my calories in, and also it's good quality protein.
Randomly looked this up yesterday. Roughly, depending on your milk, about 300 calories in a pint of milk.
What's that, sorry?
About 300 calories in a pint of milk.
Yeah.
Randomly, don't know why I looked this up yesterday, but I did.
Yeah. So it's like, and again, it's just one of those things where like it definitely, if your saturated fat is being elevated because of like lots of butter and cheese, you should address that. But typically speaking, like if you want to sort of do dairy in a healthful way, shooting for the lower fat alternatives like the skyr and the kavarg and the low fat milks or the whey proteins, etc. You can get like low fat cheese and stuff like that. Good source of protein. Good food to have in your diet. But again, some people report that they have issues with dairy. And if you test this, if you test it in terms of like, right, maybe sinus or acne or whatever it is, you go through a testing period and, you record all of these things, digestive, whatever it is, and it reveals itself that a certain threshold of dairy consumption caused you to have issues, then don't go beyond that threshold. This is kind of a thing that I say to people that have IBS is if you, when it comes to things that flare up IBS, like say caffeine, alcohol, spicy food, the short chain carbohydrates, the fermentable carbohydrates, FODMAPs as they're called, it's gonna like you're gonna be able to tolerate a certain amount of that, and this is the same thing for like maybe people with specific considerations around dairy. The likelihood is that unless you have severe lactose intolerance, like really, really bad, most people will still be able to consume a certain amount of dairy and not have any issues. And I believe that, like, based on the research that has been done on dairy, and whenever you include it, especially the low fat dairy and the higher protein, like those like quark tubes, adult frubes as I call them, like they're fucking class. Like when you look at the health promoting nature of dairy, and the convenience of it, it's second to none in my opinion. So if you can have dairy, from an ethical perspective and from a perspective of like tolerance in terms of like you don't notice that it causes any digestive issues, etc., you should be eating dairy in my opinion.
Okay. 2 questions to round out the dairy one. Are you a fan of raw milk?
Not really. No, okay. I don't think it's any more beneficial, basically. So.
Okay, you don't think it's any more beneficial. Yeah. And this whole conversation around low-fat foods, when you remove the fat, they pump in a load of other additives to try and make it taste better. Any truth to that?
Yeah, well, then this kind of comes into the artificial sweetener conversation. Like,
okay, let's go there.
So,
aspartame, here we come.
So again, the current research on artificial sweeteners shows that the exposure level that we engage, the exposure level that we're to the population in terms of like the food supply it's not an issue. Again, it's like one of those things where it's like if there was 50 things that I would be concerned about with my clients' nutrition and lifestyle, artificial sweeteners wouldn't be on that list. If there was 100 things, wouldn't be on that list.
Okay.
Right. So again, with regards to the conversation around dairy, yes, from a flavor perspective and a sort of a palatability perspective, when they pull out the fat in these low-fat dairy products, it doesn't make them as nice. So they do have to put in potentially some artificial sweeteners. They often do, or in some cases sugar, which again, that's problematic if you're trying to manage your calorie intake. So this is why like getting a little bit better versed in reading nutrition labels from a perspective of like calories and et cetera is important, because maybe you're thinking, I'm going to eat, because my ma likes these yogurts that are like, they're luxury yogurts as it says on the label. And they're like quite high in fat and quite high in sugar, but it's more one of those things where it's like, right, she kind of has them as like a dessert, but it's like still good because she's getting dairy into her diet, right? But you do want to be sort of conscious of the sort of the reading of the nutrition labels to make sure that you're like, especially if you're trying to manage your calories and lose body fat, that you're not consuming, you having a dairy product or a yogurt where the calories are bloated away out, basically, right? And this is where I think the artificial sweeteners are useful, because it doesn't bloat the calories out, but it still makes the food taste nice and it's palatable, while also for you being able to enjoy the low fat, the benefits of the low fat dairy products, right? But yeah, like just on the conversation of artificial sweeteners, again, the people will get their knickers in a twist about it. It's like cancer, it's spiking insulin, all this kind of stuff. It doesn't spike insulin because there's not any calories in it. It's not.
What do they say about that? Your brain interprets the taste and it will send the signals that are similar to eating sugar.
Really? It's like there might be just like a tiny fractional insulin response potentially to an artificial sweetener consumption, but it's like not even like worth talking about, basically. But again, when they do the studies on artificial sweeteners, there is no association between like increased cancer risk or anything like that from consuming them. And in fact, they may actually have a health promoting effect by virtue of the fact that if you take somebody that's hoofing 2 liters of full sugar Coke into them and you get them to switch to Coke Zero, that's going to have a beneficial effect on their health, and like obviously I'm going to say that water is better than Coke Zero. Your dentist would definitely agree with me on that one. But I also think that if consuming Coke Zero or a artificially sweetened low-fat dairy product is part of your diet and it helps you hit some targets and adhere to your diet a little bit better, that's a net positive for me.
Yeah, it's kind of the same conversation of which is a really common question I get for some reason. I'm not a nutritionist. Are protein bars healthy? I was like,
yeah.
Okay, if it's a Mars bar or a grenade bar, yeah, the grenade bar is a better choice. But a grenade bar is not a healthy snack. Have a banana, for example.
And a Mars bar is not unhealthy.
It's not unhealthy. It's context.
Yeah.
If it's your macros,
absolutely.
if it's within the context of what you're trying to do here, and I think any of that, your counterpart, I'm going to put you in high company here, Mr. Bio Lane Norton.
Yeah.
I think he recently did a lot on the artificial sweeteners, and he was like, guys, if you're drinking 1,000 liters of Coke a day, we might have, but then the aspartame or the sweetener is going to be the least of your problems.
Hyponatremia is your issue there, not the artificial sweetener. sweeteners,
Yeah, so-
overconsumption of fluids, like.
Yeah, so anything they're showing any sort of data on, the quantities tend to be outrageous when they're doing these tests. Or there's a lot of rat tests as well, not human studies, et cetera. So yeah, I'm pretty comfortable with that now at the moment. The sources, you've confirmed it now for me, but the sources I would trust are like, yeah, you're probably okay having that. Yeah. Do you know what I love now? They have the caffeine-free, sugar-free Coke Zero.
Oh, mate.
It's unreal.
It's the exact same as the regular version.
It's awful. It's like, I haven't drank normal Coke in 10 years. So
it is
I don't
the
even
fucking
know.
job, man.
It's lovely.
Yeah, stick a can into the freezer for 20 minutes.
Oh, A1. Yeah. I'm all over it. That's my treat now with my dinner.
Yeah, because when I lived in Vancouver, they had caffeine-free diet Pepsi, and I was just like, oh, this is class. And then when I moved home, there was no, because another thing, people will probably be like, what is he talking about? There is actually quite a distinctive difference between Diet Coke and Coke Zero.
Big time.
Big time. So there is caffeine-free Diet Coke. There was for ages, and I was just like, no, I don't like Diet Coke, so I'm not going to use that. But when I seen they had the caffeine-free Coke Zero, I was like, yes.
Yeah, and people might be like, why? I'm really sensitive to caffeine. And I really careful managing my coffee consumption. It's my first coffee in about 2 weeks now. And anything after 12 o'clock, I'll be awake until next week. So when people are like, oh, sure, it's not that much caffeine, and there's enough in that to really upset my sleep. So I can't drink any of those drinks. I think the only one is Diet 7-Up doesn't have caffeine in it that I'm aware of the popular ones.
So this is an interesting point as well. The citrus-based drinks don't have caffeine. Any orange-based drink, lemon lime. If you want to sort of think as a sort of a simple heuristic for, does this soft drink have caffeine in it? The darker cola versions typically tend to have caffeine. So Dr. Pepper, Pepsi, Coke, Lucozade will also generally has some caffeine in it. Whereas Iron Brew, another one. They're pretty nice. More of a Lucozade man, to be honest, but Iron Brew is still nice. But yeah, if you want to sort of like, if you're looking for a drink that is caffeine free, and as I say, in that realm of caffeine free, sugar free, something to have with your dinner in the evening, Club Orange Zero, Club Lemon Zero, 7-Up Free, Sprite Zero, Lilt, which actually doesn't exist anymore. It's called Fanta Pineapple Grapefruit. Really? Yeah, well, it does exist, but it's not called Lilt anymore. So,
but was it bought? Was it owned by Fanta originally? Was it Fanta?
I don't know what happened, but there was they made an announcement. I seen in something where it's like Lilt is gone, but it's not really gone. It's just called Fanta Pineapple Grapefruit. But yeah, the citrus drinks typically, again, I'm sure there is probably somebody that could be like, oh, you said this and it has caffeine. But most of them, when you look on the label of the citrus-based drinks, do not have caffeine.
Okay. Man, my list is so big here. My list is so big, but I'm going to bring you around the home bend now. We're not done yet, but we can see the finish line now. We're turning. I
am happy to stay here all day if you want.
Okay, perfect. Poor old James in the back there.
Yeah. Sorry, James.
Okay, so oils and seed oils. And I know, again, if we go back to our friend Paul, he's a big one on this, but elements of truth to it or complete bullshit? Should you be careful? Are there healthier options? Is there a scale, a spectrum? What's the story with oils and seed oils and palm oils, particularly, all this kind of stuff?
Yeah. It's interesting because what's commonly purported with the seed oils of them being like pro-inflammatory, it's actually the opposite.
Really?
Yeah, it's actually like the seed oil is because of the polyunsaturated fat and the PUFA and MUFA content. They're actually anti-inflammatory, especially things like, like say, for example, your canola oils and stuff like that. They're absolutely fine to have in your diet, and because of the sort of the composition of fats in them, they can be quite healthful in a sense. Like especially something like, say, extra virgin olive oil is like a really nutrient dense oil to have. Like it's got a good composition of healthy fats in it, and it's got like these like healthy phytonutrients as they're called. So they're just these health promoting nutrients that you get from plant-based foods. But yeah, no, it's like seed oils are absolutely fine to have. There's like it's a complete misnomer that you need to avoid seed oils. And again, like the common opposite advice then is to consume butter, to consume, say, coconut oil or ghee or these kind of things. And it's like, no, like those are like high in saturated fat, which is what we want to be reducing. So this is part of the crux of the argument with like carnivore bros. Seed oil's bad. It's like, no, it's like you're talking shite. It's like the opposite.
What about the production of a particular oil? Because what I have heard is the heating process required for a lot of the extraction, a combination of these oils. And maybe we're getting into maybe more vegetable oils and stuff like that. Compared to something like cold press olive oils or coconut oils, it's the process itself can be pro-inflammatory and carcinogenic, etc. Is there truth to that?
Like oils are only become problematic when they're rancid. you know, when they're like exposed to, like, say, for example, light, or they go off in a sense, right?
Yeah.
But like, I think that the key thing to consider here is, and this is the problem with like people saying that, you know, our food system is poisoning us and stuff like that. All of these things are really tightly regulated. You know, like, even as somebody had a question on one of my posts there about like organic food, and like the non-organic food has pesticides, and it's like, yes, but your exposure level to those pesticides are still extremely low. There's still pesticides in organic food. This is all really tightly regulated. You know, nothing gets on your shelf, on your shop, on the Tesco or the Lidl shelf, that is not regulated pretty tightly. And the same thing with like restaurants. Now, maybe when you go to, like, say, Thailand or some of these places, the regulations aren't as tight. That's when maybe you're getting into stuff like that might not be, that might be an issue. But no, like, when you look at sort of the regulatory bodies that make sure that these food products are how they should be, like, it's fairly tight, and the penalties for not adhering to their regulations can be quite sharp, like, you know. So I wouldn't be worried about that. Like, is definitely my stance on it.
Just put my hat back on here now.
Yeah, please do.
Full hat here. Yeah. I think that, again, the conversation, which sometimes I get caught up in too, is who's regulating these things, and where are the financial incentives, and what is getting through, and where are the thresholds being reduced to allow for more mass production and all this kind of stuff.
Yeah.
For me, I'm not qualified, and I don't have the information. And will I ever have the information? I do believe that there's probably a happy mid-ground there as well, that not every can't just blindly consider this is all regulated and it's all fine. Personal responsibility, testing. Again, it comes back to the same thing. Does it feel good? Does it not feel good? Are many different sources that you would verify saying this? But there's a mid-ground there. Again, don't be extreme about it.
Absolutely. Like, you know, just because, you know, say, for example, the biscuits and the crisps and the chocolate and the full sugar Coke is all regulated, you know,
you should eat it.
It's still going to, if the bulk of your diet is that stuff, it's not going to do you any favors.
Yeah.
You know, so that's where the personal responsibility. Yes, the fruit and veg that gets to your shelf, and the different oils and stuff like that, they're all good to consume, because they're, you know, the sort of the process of like making them and bringing them to the consumer is pretty tightly regulated. But at the end of the day, if the consumer comes into the shop and they make the decision to fill their cart full of lean proteins and fruits and vegetables, or to fill their cart full of junk food, that's where the problem lies, and that's where the effects downstream on the person's health is, essentially, you know.
I have a little segue for you here, because I feel like a lot of people, and again, I will include myself in this bracket sometimes, will look at some of the food we're now consuming, and it's quite clearly not naturally like supercharged chickens and oranges that are giant and covered in wax and stuff like that. But like, this stuff has all been regulated, and it maybe doesn't feel normal. And then, which is my segue into, we've seen the documentaries, and we've seen the industry farming, and we've seen the pesticides, and what's the chemical they're all talking about now? It's in Roundup. Glyphosate. Yeah. Glyphosate's in everything, and it's killing everybody. And again, there's probably elements of truth.
Yes.
But there's also elements of panic and extremism, and I want to sell my documentary, and I want to get on Rogan, etc., etc., etc. So very hard to pick out the truth. But there's no smoke without fire is my my take on it. But with all of these documentaries and different TV programs and podcasts, and maybe not podcasts, but things that we have kind of we just have verified that anything on Netflix must be true, because they're a big company. They're a private company. They've got financial incentives. They've got investment. They've got people. Where do you stand on that type of information, like documentaries? And the big one that always comes up, you know what I'm going to say here, is the Game Changers. Always comes up.
I think they're making a part 2.
Are they making a fair play. James Cameron needs a few extra quid, does he? Because that was the thing with James Cameron as well. Like, he's the owner of the biggest pea protein company in the world. And then you have, what was the argument? You had the MMA fighter on, and he was talking to, I can't remember the scientist's name now as well, because he used to listen to both of them and years ago now. But it's just so hard, because both of them presented compelling arguments. I don't know who to believe here. Now, the Game Changers, when I watched it immediately, like, is this a parody? Is this actually real life? But could you maybe explain to people how first of all, how easy it is to present something as a fact, using that appeal to authority, and using statistics that I can literally show you millions of statistics and prove anything. How easy is it for that to get into mainstream?
So again, this kind of links into what we were saying earlier about Diary of a CEO and social media exposure of nutrition information, because again, when you combine the layman's lack of ability to critique studies and the sort of the statistics that are purported on, you know, social media or in documentaries, you add that, and then you combine that with sexy editing and a really compelling story, it essentially creates this perfect storm whereby this is a very believable piece of media, and it's very compelling. And this is a problem that nutrition researchers and scientists have, is they just don't really know how to actually, like, say for example, like the public health guidelines are fairly, like, they're, apart from the sort of the tweaks that you might need to make for your own sort of individual goals and body stats and activity levels and all that jazz, public health guidelines are pretty good, like, but we don't know how to actually like communicate that to people in a way that actually makes them want to engage with them. Like, as I say, public health guidelines, the problem is not the guidelines, is that we don't follow them, But getting back to the documentaries, the problem is, as I say, they'll pull a piece of evidence and package that in a really nice way in a documentary and make it very compelling. And because people don't have the ability to appraise that correctly, they will then take that on board, and then they'll say to their friends, "Geez, did you hear? I was watching this documentary the other night, and it's like, it was saying this, this, and this." And then, maybe, and this is another problem, maybe they start eating a little bit better because of watching that documentary. They eat a little bit more vegetables or something like that.
They feel better.
They feel better, because this is another issue with, like, as I was saying earlier, with like carnivore and some of these other diets, is this might actually drive people to eat a little bit better in some capacity, because I say, like, with the Diary of a CEO guest, it's not like if they're talking for an hour and a half, it's not all nonsense. There's still good stuff in there, right? And maybe there's a case of, like, they do actually start eating better. Maybe there's a bit of a placebo effect in there as well. And then that adds to the convincing nature of this social media post, this podcast, this documentary. And again, it creates difficulty in terms of allowing people to parse what's actually, like, what's useful, what's not useful.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. But there's a lot of resistance there because it's an emotional sell.
Oh yeah,
a lot of the time it's an emotional sell. Yeah, and as with all of this stuff, and it's something we didn't really touch on today, but there's this whole concept of the healthy user bias when it comes down to a lot of these specific things. So most likely, it's like when you see the personal trainer online who's done the 6-minute abs, but 99% of their week is extreme gym training twice a day. They're dialed in. But no, it's the 6-minute abs that did it. The chances are they're doing everything else in their life to facilitate their health. But it's much easier to sell a single solution like veganism or something else like that. And then you get into the messy world of financial incentive and all that kind of stuff too. So, and I'm not saying it's everything, but it definitely exists. So, and that line, because you mentioned there our ability to critically appraise scientific literature. Now, I mean, I went to college and I spent a lot of time reading them, and I'm still not good. Where do you believe personally, because I think there's an opinion-based thing, that the responsibility lies when it comes to this information, all of this stuff we've spoken about today? Does it lie with me, or does it lie with the people who are purporting this information? Who's going to regulate that? Who do we trust to do that? What's your opinion?
This is a major hurdle, and there's no clear-cut answer, unfortunately, because, as I say, we are fighting an uphill battle with a lot of these contradictory claims and information that's purported online. And again, it just creates this sort of confusion in the general population. And again, like, you can't expect someone to be able to appraise research. Like, like, I find that difficult depending on the particular thing that's whatever I'm reading. Like, that's why I have certain people that I really trust, like Alan Flanagan. So he's, he's like, to me, he's like the GOAT when it comes to like the appraisal of nutrition research. And I trust him quite a lot with regards to, like, I read his research review, as well as other people, like for sports nutrition, ISSN, Jose Antonio, or Danny Lennon, Sigma Nutrition, or Lane Norton, or James Krieger's Weightology, Stefan Guine, Red Pen Reviews. Look all those up, guys, as well. Like, those are all really good resources, which actually sort of links into my point is, if you can curate a feed of people in your Instagram, say, for example, that they seem to have, like, not very extreme views on nutrition. They're all kind of generally saying things that are pretty consistent. Now, again, we don't want to sort of create this, like, echo chamber, because that's not necessarily a good thing as well, is to sort of, like, only curate your Instagram feed for people that say the one thing, because that's actually a problem with, like, carnivore bros and stuff like that. It's all carnivore or all vegan or whatever it is. But typically speaking, a red flag with a lot of this stuff is when somebody says something that's, like, outlandish. This is a wild claim. And if you can then, go online, and if you can even have a chat with people that you trust, like as I say, feel free to DM me on Instagram, to DM Brian, to DM any of the other triage coaches. Part of the reason that people are on social media is not just to produce content and sort of say, look at this piece of information. It's also to be social, so don't be afraid to reach out to some of these people, especially if you are interested in nutrition and sort of figuring out what is probably the most truthful answer. Try and have conversations with these people. Now, that's obviously difficult for the general population because, again, maybe their interest level is not that high and they're not going to go into that. And again, this is an issue that the people creating the public health guidelines have. And there's no clear answer to it, unfortunately, because, again, maybe a person's singular experience is 10 minutes with a doctor who's just given them the public health guidelines, or 25 minutes with a dietitian who, again, maybe is just giving them basic enough sort of things to follow, and that creates difficulty with a lot of these as well. And unfortunately, there's not a clear cut answer, and it's difficult for people in the nutrition field. Like one of my friends, Richie Kerwin, he's a nutrition researcher, and we've talked about this many times. It's just science communication and communicating how to actually pull truth and objective truth from these things. It's very, very difficult.
Yeah, and as human beings, this is the most common issue that I see with any of these conversations is there tends to be, if myself and yourself have a disagreement, I'm not disagreeing with your idea, I'm disagreeing with you as a person.
Yeah.
And I'm getting emotional about that. And then you're feeling that emotionally if this guy doesn't agree with me, he must think I'm a piece of shit.
Do you want to fight, Dan? Is that
I'm not going to fight you after all your training lately. That really presents a massive barrier. So it's barrier after barrier after barrier. Which is why I'm always interested in this question about personal responsibility, because I take a significant degree of personal responsibility.
Yes.
But I am fallible as a human being.
Yes.
And I'm also aware of that.
Absolutely.
So I'm now realizing that a lot of the time, my personal responsibility is me picking a hill to die on, rather than actually deciding to be impartial and filter the information in a very objective way. Because I'm human, and I like Joe Rogan, and I get responsive, and 100%. I like to snap back at somebody. It's my initial reaction always. So I get that, and if I'm aware of that, and I'm privileged enough to have conversations with people like yourself and consume that type of content, the average. I keep saying the average person, I should stop using that phrase, but most people are not. They don't have the privilege of having these conversations and being invested in these worlds. They're just consumers of information. And you made a very good point there. And if anyone has watched The Social Dilemma, another documentary, take it with a piece of salt, but the concept is sound. They are feeding you information that confirms whatever it is that your bias is to keep you on the platform. So your worldview will literally be dominated now. Because I read something the other day there, and I mean, this is quite obvious, but the decline of traditional media, people in our generation are not watching the news, they're consuming it on social media, which is privately owned and feeding you just what you want to hear. So my worldview completely depends on what I'm being served on this phone.
Absolutely.
And I don't even know that. I think that's what the world is.
Echo chamber.
Complete echo chamber. I remember somebody mentioned, it was during COVID, and somebody mentioned just after the lockdowns that by looking at their phone, they thought the world was burning down. There's people on the streets killing each other everywhere. I've just traveled around the country. Everyone's lovely. It's actually everyone's quite. But you think that everybody is a mass extremist now. So you become an extremist in your own head, and you develop extreme views. So that personal responsibility is a difficult pill to swallow, but it basically means take a step back and take a breath. What feels good? Who do you trust? And widen your kind of funnel for information, and then cross-reference and stuff like that. Not necessarily be an expert in reading studies. But surround yourself with people who do and consume content. Like Dean's. There's two more quick ones I want to touch on. That sounded like I was wrapping up there. Two more quick ones. One was alcohol, because you mentioned you are 5 months off alcohol.
No, sorry. I did from literally last drink was 11 o'clock. New Year's last night, still drunk right now. And then I had a drink then at the end of May, and I've had a few drinks since then. But I spent 5 months off the drink the start of the year, and I'll probably do the same towards the back end of the year as well.
Why?
So I just find that I feel better mentally and physically without it. I love going out and having a few pints with somebody. Like, it's a really enjoyable experience, like social lubricant, all that. But I just think, like, from a mental perspective, from a physical performance and recovery perspective, sleep perspective, productivity, so much better. without alcohol. Like Chris Williamson has a good video on it, where he just talks about like the three extremely valuable resources that you pull back from not drinking is calories, time, and money.
Yeah.
So
try the three big ones.
exactly. So you're saving calories because you're not drinking, and you're also not destroying a kebab at 2 o'clock in the morning on a Saturday. Obviously you're saving money because you're not going out and spending on taxis and stuff like that. Like I had a conversation with one of my clients yesterday, excuse me, and I was like, right, so one of the things that we had a discussion about was, potentially reducing his drinking because it was impeding in his goals to some degree. But rather than me just saying stop drinking, what we had a discussion about was what can you do as an alternative. So what we said was sit down with your girlfriend and say, right, we're going to maybe do this like Mexican food night. We're going to maybe have a couple of beers instead of going out and spending it all like in the clubs and on the taxis, and we're going to watch a movie. So you're replacing it with some other behavior that is almost as enjoyable, but it's, not as it doesn't have as much of an impact. So, there's a money perspective. And then time is a funny one because, if you consider the common like sesh heads experience on a weekend, it's start on a Friday or a Saturday. And then you're basically, maybe if you start on a Friday, like, and then maybe you go out again on a Saturday, that's potentially 43% of your week gone. Like, that's a huge chunk of the week just gone in terms of like you being able to get up and feel good and want to engage with something. Because like I'm the type of person that if I'm not progressing, I'm regressing, so I'm always thinking of like, right, I want to be sort of improving my content production. I want to be able to continue to learn so that I can provide a 5-star service to my clients. I want to feel like I'm making progress in training and on life and everything, all of the endeavors that I want to do well in. And I feel like alcohol is an impediment to that, especially at a certain level. Because like, even as I say, like, maybe for me, instead of me spending Saturday, Sunday, strategizing on, how to make better content or writing out some scripts or, reading something that's interesting, I spend that drinking, and then I lose those 2 days, and then that bleeds into the following week, and then I'm under stress. And, so it's kind of this like, this bit of a flywheel sort of a scenario that I find that if you can reduce or pull your alcohol consumption down, it can have a profound effect on your life. And this kind of comes into the whole thing of like monk mode and stuff like that. Like, I don't know if you're familiar with that.
Oh,
but,
very familiar, yeah.
So it's, and I put a lot of stock in that. There's definitely holes and it can be problematic to some degree as well. But like if you're a guy listening to this or a girl, but, it's usually kind of men that have this kind of like, right, I feel like I'm not being as productive as I could be. Alcohol, reducing your consumption of that can have a fucking profound effect on so many different areas of your life, specifically your productivity. And that actually allows you to create this sense of higher levels of meaning and fulfillment and productivity that really sort of builds your confidence and your happiness level on a day-to-day basis. But again, I think there's definitely a middle ground with a lot of this as well, because love going to a festival for a few pints. Like I went to the Prodigy there like 3 weeks ago.
No way.
It was fucking unreal.
Where were they playing?
Fairview Park.
No way.
Such a good concert. Arctic Monkeys supposed to go to that, but they obviously cancelled. I'm a massive music head. I love music, and I think that experience of going to a festival, it's enhanced massively by going with your friends, and it's enhanced even more by having a few drinks or whatever at it as well. And that's like that's a worthwhile experience for me. I'm happy to trade off maybe feeling a little bit shit the next day for that, but I'm not willing to trade off feeling shit every weekend for a mediocre experience on a Saturday night.
Very, very nice answer. I like that because the word intent was really important for me. I'm similar now. I rarely drink anyway. I play football and I just never got into it, I suppose. I have drank on many occasions, but I'm not a regular drinker. Yeah. And at the start of the year, myself and Brian, a friend of mine, Brian Loughlin.
Brian Loughlin, yeah. Had him on our own podcast.
Did you have him on a podcast? Yeah. Brian's a
great chap, yeah.
Anybody listen to this, I've listened to Brian many times on this podcast. But just decided this year, like I would have an average of maybe 2 or 3 drinks a month. Yeah, watching a movie on a Friday evening, or something like that. And I quite enjoy it. But I just decided I want to be really, really aware of what the intent behind most things in my life are, because I feel like that puts me in a better position of control over my life. I'm not a control freak like that, but I'm the master of my fate then.
Absolutely.
And with alcohol, what I found in the last 8 months or wherever we are now, I've had a pint of Guinness and a gin and tonic with my dad.
And
what I'm now starting to think is, okay, it's not the alcohol, it's the intent behind every single thing I do.
Oh, yeah.
From social media to food to training to alcohol specifically. And alcohol was an easy one for me to kind of generate that understanding around. So to not sound like this is a holier than thou, we are these healthy kind of living monk mode super performers. For me, this was more about understanding when alcohol is a decision that I make to enhance an experience, and when it's something I've just done subconsciously because that's what you do. And I find that in a lot of cases, many of these different things are things that are just subconscious. We do it out of habit, out of environment, or to cover up some other area that we potentially should probably be working on, like social anxiety. It really helps as a social lubricant.
Oh, yeah.
But if you're constantly anxious in the company of people, there's probably something there you can look at. And this is where when I was speaking to the likes of Pat Dibley and stuff like that, this whole idea of shadow work and making the unconscious conscious, as Carl Jung would say. For me, the alcohol was a part of that. Just make it conscious and do whatever the hell you want with it. But now you know that you're making a decision to go to the Prodigy and have a few drinks. You're not just going and having drinks because everyone's having drinks. And then losing those days of that productivity. And those days add up, man. They fucking add up. And like if you to look at the average drinking stats in Ireland, it's a lot of bloody days in the like because it's the knock on of the Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday as well. You recover by the Thursday, you're on again Friday or whatever it is. So yeah, it was more about the intent for me. And then I obviously found Chris Williamson years ago, and he talked about it with alcohol, but also caffeine as well. So I'm like, this could literally change my life. Now everything I look at as, will this enhance my life or my experience, my relationship, or my or is it going to take away? And pros and cons, make my decision. Now it's my decision. Off you go, no problem. So it's not about the alcohol. It's not about the food. It's not about the drugs. It's not about anything. It's about the intent and how you approach that specific thing. So really nice to hear that your experience is the same.
You like, in my opinion, you know, if you're unhappy with your current circumstances, and you can like locate a definable factor like alcohol, you need to be ruthlessly stringent with that. You know, because as I say, like, personal responsibility. Like, I do understand that there's like many different like influencing factors. You know, if you think of like, say, Albert Bandura's social cognitive theory, like the different interlinking factors that influences a person's behavior. But at the end of the day, like, you are the one making the decision to go and do the thing, whether it's like, you know, drinks in the house or drinks in the pub. And if you can identify that is having a substantial impact on you living a life that you want to live, or potentially getting started on the path, as Jocko says, that would lead you to a better life, then you need to be pretty ruthless with that. And I'm not saying that like tell all your friends to fuck off and never go out again, but maybe it means doing 30 days, and maybe it means practicing nights out with Guinness Zero or Heineken Zero, and you know, seeing what that feels like, you know, from a social perspective, you know, as you described in terms of socializing without alcohol, and see how it feels in terms of the productivity that's expressed by you not being absolutely dying and fused to a couch on a Sunday. So
I feel like that's a gateway into another 3-hour podcast. You know what that means. I have half a list here that we haven't covered, and that whole world of discipline, mindset, all habit, all that kind of stuff, which I know you also have a massive interest in. So we're going to park that. We're going to leave that as a little teaser for people. If you do me the honor of coming back on.
Oh, I absolutely love that.
For another conversation. I really enjoyed that. I actually, this timer does weird things. It says 16 minutes now, so I have no idea where we are. Actually, sorry, I did promise, if you don't mind, Mr. James Henton is on the ones and twos behind us here. And I think he might have a question he might like to throw into the mix.
Please.
As well.
Fire away,
That's
James.
okay with you?
Yeah.
We're just going to wait for him to turn his mic on now.
Yeah.
Question on my mind. Just one to finish up with. I'm just wondering, testosterone supplements, yay or nay?
Nay. 100% nay.
Straight up nay.
Yeah.
Any benefit at all, or if someone was to, you know, looking to increase their testosterone, what would you recommend?
I would say that, well, from a supplemental perspective, what you'll find is all of the supplements that are purported to boost testosterone do so in either they don't do it at all, or they do it in a staggeringly small amount. They have such a small influence that it's not even worth talking about. And also, a lot of the herbal supplements are extremely unregulated, so you're not actually like, you know, it can be very difficult to know if you're actually getting, you know, the sort of the efficacious dose of Fedosia egresis or Long Jack or whatever it is, or Turkesterone. Like, it's completely not regulated and not tight enough to say, right, when I'm taking this tablet, it has this amount of Turkesterone or whatever it is, but it doesn't have a substantial effect. the only reliable, well, I'll go into the lifestyle factors first, but the lifestyle factors are just like making sure that you're sleeping well, making sure that your, stress levels are well managed. Again, the big rocks that I talked about, eating well, not mauling yourself with training. So resistance training and aerobic training will have a positive impact on your testosterone levels. However, if you're absolutely wrecking yourself, and this is a problem that I have with like David Goggins and Jocko, some people will adopt their hard as a motherfucker, go hard, go home stance, but overtraining actually has a negative impact on your testosterone. So, in that nice sweet spot with your training, maintaining healthy body fat levels. Again, a lot of this advice is like it's
the same stuff, guys.
It's reverberations of advice that your, health optimization, hormone optimization, very much similar. And then once you have all those big rocks blocked off, the only other reliable way to increase it is the gear, unfortunately, which is, I had a post about that there during the week. Most people don't do steroids for the right reasons, and they don't realize the health risks. It's a you pull one lever, where, inject a load of testosterone, and all these other levers start flying off here. Your cholesterol goes mad, and your liver enzymes are all over the place. So it's, again, that is a reliable way to increase it with the pharmacological side of things. But typically those lifestyle factors are going to be where you want to sit. And to answer your question, James, the testosterone supplements are not worth it for a massive variety of reasons. The financial reasons, the lack of consistency and regulation with them, and also the fact that when you look at the research, most of them don't even have an effect on a definable effect on testosterone levels anyway.
Very well said.
So
thank you very much.
You thought you were free and clear, and we pulled you back into that last big one there.
Love
it. Dean, really appreciate your time. I knew I was going to have fun, but I had more fun than I even thought I would.
Amazing.
People, you did mention that it's okay for people to reach out if they have questions. Are you currently working with new people? Is there spaces?
Yeah. So I have a few spaces available. Again, because I'm working more on the media side of things with the company, I do have a more limited capacity for clients. So probably have like maybe 3 or 4 spaces left in terms of like coaching and stuff like that. So if anyone is interested, you can go to my Instagram, so @dean.mcaloon. I'm sure you'll link it all in the show notes or whatever. But as I say, I work for Triage Method, so you can look them up on Instagram, or you can go to triagemethod.com/online coaching, and you can read all about like the process of coaching, how to inquire, little bios on us, testimonials, all that jazz. But yeah, that's where you can find me on my own personal Instagram, or you can find us on the Triage Method Instagram. We're also producing a lot of YouTube content now as well. And, as I say, check out the site, because like Paddy is producing these absolutely huge articles on those big rocks that I mentioned earlier, like massively extensive articles. He has the nutrition and sleep ones finished. He is wrapping up the stress one soon, maybe within the next couple of weeks, and then he's going to finish it off with a training one. Like these are like 30 to 40,000 word articles. Whoa. They're huge. And to be quite honest with you, this is probably not a good thing for me to say, but like you could literally like achieve most of your results by just reading those articles and applying the information. But again, if you'd like specific help and you want
they're like, no.
Yeah. It's just like there's a little like bleeper that's going on in my ankle cuff here. He's just like, shut up. Yeah. But again, if you need help with the accountability, support, and application of a lot of this stuff, we are taking clients, and we're always very happy to have chats with people and discuss any of the topics that we've been talking about on the podcast as well.
Yeah, and this is the amazing thing about it as well, because we spoke about some of the negatives of all this information, but like the vast amount of information that you guys put out there for free, is insane. So like anybody listening, if you like Joe Rogan, brohead, jiu-jitsu doing, tattoo covered rock music, Dean here with all his own biases, get on the page, guys. And there's a podcast there as well. What's the name of the podcast?
So there's a Triage Method podcast, and then Brian and I have a podcast which we haven't actually produced much new episodes, but again we have a big library of nutrition specific podcasts, and that is Nutrition and Health with Bino and Dino. So I'm Dino, his nickname's Bino, so that's why we that's the moniker that we put on it. So
I love it, and like it is a great place for people who are intimidated by the vast amount of information out there. If you don't want to read a 30 to 40,000 article to start off with, you can literally go on and just cherry pick what are we interested in right now, training, testosterone, whatever it is, and you can probably find something relatable and just start there, and just start to educate yourself, consume the content, have conversations. In my experience, that's what's worked best. Is why I do this right now. Have more conversations. You don't have to make your mind up after reading one thing or seeing a social media post. Listen to Dean's podcast that we just did here, and he'll answer all the questions for you. But Dean, thank you so much for your time. You've already committed live on air, so I'm going to get you back for another episode.
Amazing.
We'll dive into more stuff. Hope you enjoyed the conversation.
Looking forward to the next episode already.
Brilliant. I'll bring my bro science hat in the next one as well. But thank you so much, and we'll see you next time, guys.
Awesome. Thanks, guys.